Board members to the table and please be seated. This January 23rd, 2014, regular meeting number 12 of the Fairfax County School Board will now come to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, to be followed by a moment of silence and national anthem. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight all the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets were clear, the bombs bursting in air, came proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does the star-spangled banner wave all the land of the free and the home of the brave. We have some announcements. I think that was exciting. The board did not hold a closed meeting. We wanted to have one, but we couldn't. If you would like to access tonight's agenda and related meeting documents, you can do so by going to the Fcps website, select School Board, and then upcoming meetings and agendas. If you have signed up to speak before the board during citizen participation, please turn in 16 copies of remarks at this time to the deputy clerk sitting in the section to my right. If you would like to review a copy of the agenda and any agenda item that is being discussed tonight, that information is also on the table by the auditorium entrance. Please turn off or silence your cell phone, and let me call on Mr. Ash for an announcement.
February is African American History Month. Originally established as Negro History Week in 1926 by Dr. Carter G. Woodson, a noted African American author and scholar. This event evolved into the establishment in 1976 of February as Black History Month. This commemoration has increasingly been referred to as African American History Month, although both names are currently in use. When Carter G. Woodson established Negro History Week, he realized the importance of providing a theme to focus the attention of the public. The intention has never been to dictate or limit the exploration of the Black experience, but to bring the public's attention important developments that merit emphasis. This year's theme, Civil Rights in America, was chosen in recognition of the 50th anniversary of the 1964 Civil Rights Act.
Thank you, Mr. Ash. For those of you who had a fortune of listening to national anthem, just want you to know that chairman does not always sing national anthem at every school board meeting. I hope that doesn't become expectation.
We wish he did.
We were supposed to have a Freedom Hill Elementary School students singing national anthem this evening, but with the school closing, we weren't able to have them. So they will come back to us some other time. This evening, we have 3 recognitions, starting with recognition of a National School Counseling Week, to be followed by a recognition of a National Career and Technical Education Month, and then a recognition of a Custodian Appreciation Week. What are we going to do with this? I'm going to call on each board member to read the respective recognitions, all 3 of them, one at a time, and then we'll all come down to the front and have 3 different photo sessions, inviting 3 different groups to join us. So with that, the first recognition is recognition of a National School Counseling Week, and let me call on Ms. Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Moon. I want to thank all the school counselors who are here tonight. Before I read the recognition, I do want to say that when I speak to students in my district, that one of the things that's brought up over and over again is how critical their relationship with the school counselor is. That relationship and the support that you give them is critical to their learning and their well-being as well as their future, and they're well aware of it, and we are too. So thank you so much. National School Counseling Week, February 3rd to 7th, 2014. National School Counseling Week 2014, School Counseling, Building Magical Futures, will be celebrated from February 3rd to 7th, 2014, to focus public attention on the unique contribution of professional school counselors within U.S. school systems. National School Counseling Week, sponsored by the American School Counselor Association, highlights the tremendous impact school counselors can have on helping students achieve school success and plan for a career. Every day, school counselors work with students, families, and staff to address the academic, personal, social, and career needs of all students. Fairfax County Public Schools employs over 600 school counseling professionals, including school counselors, directors of student services, and career center specialists. These professionals are committed to preparing students to become lifelong learners and productive members in a global society. Mr. Moon, you want us to wait for the photo?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Evans. Next is a recognition of a National Career and Technical Education Month, and let me call on Mr. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I read the resolution, I do want to thank all the educators in career and technical education that are here. And I was able to speak with a few of you at the reception earlier, and I hope those of you that I spoke to, you'll forgive me for repeating this anecdote, but I think it's such a wonderful one that I want to share it with everyone. So I had occasion to donate a vehicle to the academy at Chantilly High School. And I was there before the instructor was there, so I was talking to some of the students and we were chatting along. And at one point, one of the students said to me, "This class, the auto shop, is what gets me up in the morning and motivates me to come to school every day." And I thought, wow, that is really a testimony to the great work that goes on here and goes on in our schools. So I certainly wanted to share that anecdote. And another thing I'll just mention is I'm going through an education process, as I know all of my colleagues are here, but I certainly learning more about what's going on in the schools, but also gaining perspective as a parent. My 2 girls have graduated and gone on, but my perspective as a parent looking back is that I never knew enough about all of the opportunities in career and technical education that are available throughout Fairfax County schools. And so I have two thoughts there, and then I'll get moving here, Mr. Moon. First of all, I think as parents, I think looking back, it's helpful if we don't just go locked into the four-year college thing for every kid, because I'm not sure that's actually what every kid needs. So we should have the courage to help our students find the things that really stir their passion. The second thing is, and this is a deeper issue which we actually talked about a couple of months ago, but I think there's room for our entire community to start asking everyone from educators in policy at the state level and federal level and higher education to start looking at graduation requirements, because there is so much value, I think, in integrating the kinds of courses that we offer in career and technical education and integrating them into the curriculum that you would get as a part of your diploma and not just as an elective. So I think that's a further conversation, and I thank you all for bearing with me. So having said all of that, career and technical education prepares both youth and adults for a wide range of careers, from nurse to computer technician. These careers may require varying levels of education, from high school to post-secondary certificates to 2- and 4-year college degrees. The subject areas most commonly associated with career and technical education are business and information technology, which is programming, business management, and information technology; trade and industrial, skilled trades such as automotive technician, carpenter, cosmetologist, law enforcement; health and medical services, nursing, dental, and emergency medical technicians; family and consumer services, culinary arts, child development and education; marketing, sales and entrepreneurship; and technology education, electronics and engineering. Career and technical education is offered in the middle schools, high schools, 2-year community and technical colleges, and other post-secondary schools. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, 18 of the 20 fastest growing occupations within the next decade will require career and technical education.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fairfax. Next, we have a recognition of a Custodian Appreciation Week. And this is something I enjoy reading every year as the son of a former school custodian whose mother had to work as a custodian very hard for honest living and to support the family and to help educating her 3 children all to go to college. That it gives me great pleasure to read this recognition. The school board recognizes the hard work and unending dedication of the custodians who work for Fairfax County Public Schools. Our custodians are the first employees to arrive in the morning and the last employees to leave at night. By providing clean and safe school environments, the custodians at FCPS have a direct impact on the educational success of our students. Many custodians take additional training leading to certification as professional custodians. The week of February 24 through 28 has been named Custodian Appreciation Week to recognize and thank our dedicated custodians whose attention to detail and high standards affect all students, employees, and many members of the community. With that, let me invite all school board members to come to the front, stand on the risers, so that we can invite those who are being recognized tonight for photo sessions.
Chairman Moon, let me suggest that we do counselors first, and so we don't have folks standing around. So if counselors will come on up, and we'll have a picture.
I should have got you to organize. Hey, well, let's send some people up on stage. Yeah, so we'll take the rest of the group up on the stage behind.
Hey guys on the back row, make 2 rows for me, please, and come up to the edge. Yeah. While they're doing that, guys, slide in. Turn sideways. Okay, guys on this side. Turn sideways and slide in. There you go. Good. All right, okay, everyone look right here for me, guys. Count 3. 1, 2, 3. Oh, that's all right. Count 3. 1, 2, 3. And one more series. Here we go. Thank you guys very much.
Well, that was certainly a well-organized group, so I'm going to challenge the career and technical education folks to do even better. So if you'll come on up when you have a chance, we'll get our picture. Yeah, I don't. Well, don't block it. Hey, Taylor, run right over here real quick. Everyone look right here. Count 3. 1, 2, 3. Looks good. A few more. Thank you very much. And we saved the best for last, of course. We'd like our custodians to come on up.
Right here. Count 3. 1, 2, 3. Guys, thank you very much.
I see some Boy Scouts in the audience, starting with a young gentleman here. Would you like to stand to be recognized? Where are you from? Scott, shroom number? 869 from McLean. Okay, thank you for being here. And I see another Scout in uniform. Shroom number and where are you from? 150 from Annandale. Thank you. Thank you for being here tonight. Is there any other Scout? One in the middle? Shroom number? 140 from Fort Church. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, there is another one behind the camera. Would you like to stand? Troop number 1115 from Springfield, Virginia. Okay, thank you. Any other Boy Scout? Last chance. Thank you. The next order of business is presentations to the school board, starting with the Spotlight on Learning. School counseling supports the whole child. Let me call on Mr. Perez.
Thank you, Chairman Moon. It's my pleasure to introduce the group for Spotlight on Learning tonight. And tonight's Spotlight will be presented by Marcy Neal, Coordinator, School Counseling Services, Instructional Services Department, or ISD, for Fairfax County Public Schools. And she'll be supported by Mary Zampalik, a parent from Liberty Middle School. And the topic for this presentation is School Counseling Supports the Whole Child. And we're also pleased to have with us as part to support this group, Sloan Presidio, Assistant Superintendent of ISD, and Craig Herring, Director, Pre-K through 12 Curriculum, ISD. All yours, Marcy.
Thank you, Mr. Bears. The role of the school counselor has changed significantly in the past 15 years. While school counselors continue to focus on academic, personal, social, and college and career counseling, the approach towards serving students is vastly different than the guidance counselors you may remember. The development of a national model for school counseling in 2001 challenged school counselors to shift from a reactive approach where only select students receive services to a proactive, preventative, and responsive approach where counselors meet the needs of all students. Under the American School Counselor Association national model, school counselors review data and seek feedback through community advisory councils to develop and modify their programs to best support the success of all students. Fairfax County is recognized nationally for its school counseling programs. 20 FCPS school counseling programs have received recognition for the development and sustainment of national model programs. This recognition, or RAMP, is a tremendous honor for a school counseling program, similar to national boards, and has only been accomplished by 500 schools nationwide. Tonight's Spotlight will focus on the role of the school counselor in using data to meet the needs of the whole child.
Be it in elementary, middle, or high school, FCPS school counselors help build a foundation for learning by providing academic, college and career, and personal social counseling, thus educating the whole child and making FCPS graduates college and career ready. On any day, at any school, you'll see FCPS school counselors using data to determine areas of need, and then interventions that will support those needs.
So I wanted to look at the developmental reading assessment, which is DRA scores, how the reading level of our students are measured, and I wanted to help students increase those reading scores. And I thought, well, how can I support the work that they're doing and still get the message that I wanted as a counselor across?
The school counselors helped improve my students' academic performance by helping them look at the books they're reading much more deeply than they were looking at them before. First graders, as new readers, often are so focused on making sure they're saying the right words that they're not really able to be thinking about the books, much less thinking about them really deeply. And by getting them focused on how characters are feeling in the books, something that they can easily associate with and easily feel comfortable identifying, she's given them an into their reading that both makes them more motivated and makes them more interested and helps them to think more deeply about what they're doing as readers.
All right, so when we talk about dropping out or continuing on past.
So we wanted to base the lesson off of the school board goal on graduation rates, and we also were looking at the graduation rates of the high school that a lot of our students feed into. We knew that we needed to do something and kind of share with the students what they need in order to graduate, and we are able to kind of gain the attention of all of our students. We have our ESOL population and our special ed population, and our advanced students are all receiving the same lesson at a different pace.
I'm going to start calculating my GPA, and from now in 8th grade to my 4 years in high school, I'll be doing that so I can know what my GPA is, so boost it up a little bit more so I can get into the college that I want to.
The scenarios at your table groups, and then after that we're going to give you...
We have had the opportunity to have the data from the youth survey, Fairfax County Youth Survey, broken out by school for us a couple years ago. And so as a result of that information and just what we've seen here in the school, we saw a need for doing the Acknowledge Care Tell program. So they see what to do with when a friend is drinking. They see what to do when a friend is withdrawing from social groups, not participating in activities as much as they used to, maybe going through some relationship issues, and they're able to now see that, address it, get their friends help.
The program this morning really helped me realize that we don't have to be so scared about these issues. We're able to help our friends because we have these tools and techniques to make the situation better.
So as far as when bullying happens,
we've decided as a Payfield Pyramid to do a week-long program and parent evening event to emphasize the importance of pro-social behaviors. In fact, we entitled our week Dare to Care Week. This program was very much data-driven, and in fact, when it is concluded, we're looking to issue a post-survey to our students and parents to see the effectiveness of it all.
It definitely spread awareness around the school, and I saw people mentioning Dare to Care Week, and they also were doing good things, and I saw that happening, and it was really good. The change was instant. You could feel it. It was a happier vibe.
Know that I have a person to talk to about anything. I really trust her.
I always know that I have not just one person, but a group of people I can go to help me with things.
Because they help build relationships between themselves and the students, which enables trust. And later on, when they're talking about more real-life decisions, the students will take them more seriously.
And the counselors are the ones that help us keep in mind the rest of what is in a child's life and in their own personality and what that means for them at school every day and at home.
School counselors have the affinity and the ability to look at a student's strength, and they hone in on that strength.
School counselors and the Career Center, they're the family doctor of education, because as parents, we're advocates for our kids. But it's also wonderful to know that we have someone sort of on the inside who is an advocate as well and who is concerned about the success of your child's education.
Fairfax County Public Schools School Counseling Services. Educating the whole child, every school, every day.
That was a wonderful compilation, I want to tell you, and that shows a lot that's going on in the schools. I'm a parent. My name's Mary Zampolak. I know a couple of you older school members, but most of you are new to me. I have kids with special needs and advanced. I have neurotypical kids, and my kids have been in the school system for 20 years. I have 4 kids. My last 2 in the school system are at Centerville High School and Liberty, and the likes of Renee Pete and the counselors at Liberty Middle School actually invited me. I'm kind of removed now as an older parent, but they had a career day at the school at Liberty, and middle school is kind of I used to think of it as a holding tank for kids, these 2 years that they have. You don't really know what to do with them, but I have seen remarkable interventions thanks to the counselors, not only in elementary and high school, but middle school. And they actually invite the parents in. I got to do a career day. I was the one with the mask up there in the middle. The kids had to dress for success. They asked questions. The one thing that struck me was that they were actually thinking about subjects and what they needed to do in order to potentially have a career in the future in middle school, which I thought, this is pretty incredible. And when I had special needs kids, because of the counselors, we had autism awareness way back 10, 15 years ago when no one really knew what autism was. Now everybody knows what autism is. They include kids. When my first kids came in the county, they were still doing inclusion. I mean, not inclusion, they were self-contained. Now, you see these kids, you see best buddies, you see all these kids interacting with each other. They're learning more, not just about the academics, but they're learning to self-advocate. They're learning how to be self-determined, help their peers. And I'm so impressed with you up here, by the way. But self-determination is the key to success. And it's not just the academics. And as Ted said, these other programs, these kids might not all go to go to college or secondary education, but Fairfax County has done a tremendous job. I mean, I have my one kid with autism who was told he would never make it through secondary school, primary school. He's now a mechanical engineering, biomedical engineering student at Virginia Tech. And I was told by a neuropsychologist that he would never amount to much. And I am grateful to Fairfax County. I'm grateful to the teachers, but the counselors are knowledgeable. They look at the needs of the kids. When I was in school, they were reactive. Now they're proactive. Every school is different. All the kids in the schools are different. They look at what the needs are, and they provide the services to address those needs. As a parent, I got to participate in a high-risk girls group called Girl Talk for girls who were participating in very risky behaviors. I went to the counselors. They sent me to classes. They got me certified. I can't say enough about Fairfax County Public Schools, but those counselors are some of the most tremendous population within the schools, and they see the students for who they are, not, like I said, not just academically. So I'm proud to be here as a parent, and I thank you all.
Thank you, and let's see, any board member? Mrs. McLaughlin?
Over time, the last 2 years since I joined the board, I've spoken as an individual with a graduate degree in social work and in mental health. And school counselors are truly critical to the success of each and every child in our public schools. And I have been very proud of this board and our work to try and support this focus on the whole child and making sure that our children can be successful in all capacities. To the parent who just spoke, I was deeply moved by your story. I'm currently the parent of 2 high schoolers and a middle schooler. My director of student services, Tim Hopkins, is here tonight from Woodson, and I can also attest to amazing support and services that our counselors give our children. My senior would not be surviving this college application process without them. And the patience that they show, all of those squirrely seniors who are trying to figure it all out is just truly remarkable. And they do a lot of hand-holding for us parents too, especially this being my first one. That's always the scariest, to try and get through that college process. So I just really wanted to say to all of you here tonight, my hope is that as we move through this challenging budget times, that we will continue to be able to work with you and find out the best ratios we can, because I truly believe that the work you do along with our school social workers and psychologists are our best efforts to help every child be successful. And I know that you all really carry very heavy caseloads, and I just thank you for everything you're giving to our kids every single day. And it's wonderful to see you out here tonight.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Shores, to be followed by Mr. Narcofax.
I too am thankful both from the parent perspective and the counselor perspective to hear more about your programs. I am wondering, do you happen to know how many schools we have that are RAMP certified or RAMP qualified at this point?
Yes, we have 20 as of right now.
So we have 20 out of 500 in the nation.
Correct.
I think that is just such, I mean, that's got to be precedential. And that is so critical. One of the schools that I've worked close with is Irving through their RAMP process. And I see the direct impact that they have as a parent of children across ability levels, but significantly married to someone whose parents were told he wouldn't graduate from high school, that they had to be prepared for him, and holds a master's and is a fellow in a leading international expert in his field. That's the key that counselors offer to our students. And I struggled very hard. That's one of the more disappointing budget cycle losses that I had last year, was trying to get more money for more counselors and more school psychologists. Ms. McLaughlin and I share students at Woodson, students at West Springfield, and I have students at South County who've all communities have been touched and rescued to some degree by counselors across the fields, and the students need you. And so I hope that when we get down to the final budget cycle in May, that we remember that you're valuable to our students, not just for college preparation, but far beyond that.
Thank you, Mr. Fairfax, to be followed by Mr. Burkham.
I just wanted to express my thanks to you for your comments, both you and you as a parent. Your words as a parent really resonated with me. I have two children. I have one child that graduated in June, and one that is now a freshman. And I do realize the important role that counselors play throughout, my son's career, who just graduated. There were many times where he needed them, and I feel your words, and I thank all the counselors. And I don't often take a moment of personal privilege, but since I have it tonight, I do want to thank my son's counselors who are out there tonight, the Director of Student Services, who is Deborah Guillen, and my son's counselor, who is Mark Osbrooks. So thank you all for the work that you've done for my family. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Mr. Wickham next.
I do see Ms. Robin Lady in the audience, Director of Student Services at Chantilly, and I did not know what RAMP was until she brought that to the PTSA at Chantilly High School. So I'm just wondering if you could give us just a brief overview, the thumbnail sketch of what RAMP, what it is, how you get RAMP certified, and the benefit that it brings to the counseling practice in schools.
Sure. Essentially, RAMP is about a 3-year process where a school goes through a reflection of looking at their data and their needs within their school and developing their programs around those needs. So they're looking at student achievement data, they're looking at things like the youth survey data, they're using community advisory councils, which I know many of you have participated in, to get that qualitative data and feedback, and especially getting that student voice and parent voice at the table to say, are the programs we're providing really working for you? So to become a RAMP certified school, the schools have to pull together documentation of the different components of the national model, and they submit that for review. And it is similar to a national boards. I mean, it's an extensive process. As I said, it's about a 3-year process to become a RAMP school. And they get that designation for 3 years and have to reapply if they wish to continue that designation. So, the benefit certainly is the transparency it brings to the community, and that relationship between the community and the schools, and understanding how are we really servicing our students. And for our schools to certainly know that they've got a school counseling program that's responsive to the needs of all kids. Thank you.
Mr. McElveen?
I would just take a minute of personal privilege to thank my former counselor at Marshall High School, Tanya Shuford, and also Robin Lady and Cindy Blakely, who both worked there at that time as well. So thanks for all you've done.
Any other board member? If not, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, counselors in the audience. You're welcome to stay, but you don't have to. We have a school tomorrow. We do have a school tomorrow. The next order of business is citizen participation. Fairfax County citizens who would like to address the school board should arrange to be placed on the speakers list by signing up online at www.fcps.edu or by calling the school board office at 571-423-1075. If the concern is a group concern, please consider appointing a spokesperson, and while the spokesperson is speaking, those in support may stand to show their support. The school board will not hear statements involving issues that may have been scheduled for public hearings, such as capital improvement program, budget and boundaries, or personal attacks on any person. Complaints regarding individual students or school-based employees should not be raised at public meetings. Any such concerns should be directed to the appropriate school principal or other school official. Citizens are encouraged to write the school board on any school-related topic. Speakers are requested to limit their remarks to not more than 3 minutes and provide at least 16 copies of their presentation for distribution to the board. Tonight, 2 citizens have signed up to address the board. Amy Anderson, to be followed by Kimberly Adams. Amy Anderson.
Good evening. My name is Amy Anderson, and I am the mother of 2 FCPS students. My daughter goes to the Davis Center, and my son is at Marshall High School. Go Statesman. And I am also a senior clinician in the Infancy and Early Childhood program with the Community Services Board for Fairfax and Falls Church. And full disclosure, I'm also the CSB representative to the Advisory Committee on Students with Disabilities. So I actually would recommend that you not listen to anything I say, because I am a bleeding heart liberal. I am a believer in big government. I am the person you would most expect to say what I'm about to say. So instead, I would like to have you take a look at what I provided you with, which are not copies of my own statements, but a Nobel Prize winner economist, several retired military officers, and your own speaker guidelines. Oh, I also threw in a Marshall High School editorial because I love the Statesman and I thought it was very good about play. But I would ask you to look at what they're saying about the importance of early childhood education. There is very good research out there, again, done by leading economists showing the economic benefits as well as the social benefits of teaching children very early what are called social emotional skills or soft skills. That's what the economists call them, including delaying gratification, the ability to stand in line, affect regulation, not throwing chairs when you get upset, impulse control, being able to raise your hand and wait to be called on, tolerance for others, awareness of personal space and boundaries, and being able to follow instructions given to a group. I think as a community, we are faced with 2 very big challenges. One is that there are a lot of kids in our community who come to kindergarten with no preschool experience. Oftentimes, they don't even speak English. And so they are just grappling with the very basic mechanics of being in a large group and figuring out what is going on. And we are asking those children to meet the demands of middle-class parents, such as myself, who send their children to preschool and then expect them to begin a rigorous academic program in kindergarten, which now includes reading with comprehension, And when my son was in kindergarten, he's now a freshman, when he was in kindergarten, it was like you had to have 20 sight words. And being able to count to 100 in several different ways. And again, when my son was in kindergarten, it was, I'm out of time. Whoa, 3 minutes went really fast. Sorry about that. Anyway, please read what I gave you. It really does make the argument for supporting early education. And I love the FCP program.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
The Kimberly Adams is the next speaker.
Good evening, Chairman Moon, members of the school board, Mr. Paris. My name is Kimberly Adams, and I am the president of the Fairfax Education Association. And it is always our pleasure to join with the school board as we honor employee groups who work hard for the benefit of our Fairfax County students. Our school counselors, our guidance counselors are on the front lines assisting students as they deal with the challenges of growing up, as you saw in the video. From teaching students how to deal with conflict resolution to counseling a student saddened by the loss of a loved one, helping students reach the goal of college, the counselors are there at every turn to make sure our students are learning how to be resilient young people. Our schools are better places for all students and teachers because of the dedicated counselors in Fairfax County. And so the FEA joins you in applauding their work. Secondly, I want to recognize the career and technical education colleagues. If you want to understand what dedication means, you should shadow a CTE teacher. As teachers of the co-curricular programs in our schools, these folks work long hours well into the summer months to make sure that their students have a chance to compete in their areas of study. They often do this without compensation. Think of what might happen to the students who are not interested in college if we didn't have our CTE programs. We need all kinds of workers in our society, and we rightfully applaud our colleagues who help prepare talented young men and women for the workforce. The FEI highly recommends our culinary arts programs. We use their catering services for all of our major functions. And last but by no means least, I'm pleased to join you in recognizing the work of our custodial colleagues. The FEA has fought long and hard to bring recognition to this under-recognized group of employees. We know the amount of work they must accomplish each day to keep our schools safe and clean. At your recent work session on later start times, Mr. Plattenberg made a comment that our buildings are used practically 24/7. Think of what that means for the custodial staff responsible for keeping a building clean and welcoming place for our community. From picking up after our children, to setting up tables and chairs for our PTA, to removing the snow and ice so that we can begin the school day tomorrow, apparently, our custodians are on the job. Critics of the financial demands in our school system should spend just one day with any of these employees represented in counseling, career and technical education, and custodial services. They would see how vitally important each person is to our community and how they contribute to the well-being and future of our children. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next order of business is a student representative matters. Mr. Ash.
So last Wednesday, we had the students had the January Student Advisory Council meeting. For those who don't know, that's it's a body made up of students from across the county from different high schools. So first, during my remarks, I caught them up to speed with what was going on with the school board, and one of the items I mentioned was the budget and how it would affect students. And I mentioned the AP-IB test fees requirements. And there was an audible murmur out of the students when I said that. And I was later approached by a group of around 10 students who were just wondering about what that would mean. And when I explained to them what it would look like, they brought up, they had many concerns, and they understood that there would be a fee waiver, but nonetheless, they brought up the concern that for students taking a full IB diploma, that ends up being 7 classes and $100 a class. That really starts to add up. So I would advocate that as we go and look back at the budget, I'm going to be looking for $4 million. It's not going to be easy, but if we that was very. The students made an active effort to bring that up to me, and I think it's worth looking into again. Second, after that, on a much lighter note, we had a taste test where we actually got to try different new foods that were in the works. And the theme of this year apparently was burgers, because we tried 4 different burgers and a vegetarian option. And students actually found a burger that they liked that only had, as far as we could tell, 3 ingredients. It was not a long list of ingredients, so that was really good. And afterwards, I had a short discussion with Ms. Evans and some students from her schools, and we had the chance to explore various issues with the students. So I really enjoyed that, and definitely take those comments taking those comments into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ash. Next, we go into action items. We have 2 action items, actually 1. The FY 2015 through 2019 Capital Improvement Program. I believe that Mr. McKelvin has a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Moon. I move that the school board approve the fiscal year 2015-2019 capital improvement program as described in the narrative and in the superintendent's proposed fiscal year 2015 through 2019 capital improvement program summary.
Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Hines. Ms. McKelvin, you want to speak?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Ms. Hines? All right. Let me call on Ms. Evans for an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Moon. I move to amend the fiscal year 2015-19 CIP to change the project listed in the high school renovations category, page 13, following Marshall, Jefferson, Langley, West Springfield, Herndon, and Oakton from, quote, Renovation 1 School, close quote, to Falls Church High School.
Is there a second?
I second.
Seconded by Ms. Hines. Ms. Evans, you want to speak on your motion?
It's Mrs. Reed.
Mrs. Reed, seconded. You want to speak on your motion?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a very simple, straightforward amendment. If you look on page 13 of the CIP, you'll see that there's a list of high schools that are listed in the order that they are in the queue, starting with Marshall, then Jefferson, Langley, West Springfield, Herndon, Oakton. And after that, it just says Renovation 1 School. The next school up for renovation is Falls Church High School. So in talking with staff and talking with my colleagues, this is just recognizing the reality that Falls Church is the next one up for renovation among our high schools. And so I would like to codify that by simply naming Falls Church High School. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Reed, you want to speak on your second?
I really don't have anything to add. That was very well stated.
Okay. Is there any board member or Mr. Church?
This is just a very general comment. I have no problem supporting the amendment, but one suggestion that I made and that I hope that we can maybe see next year, and while you say codify that it's the next, that everything in the CIP is a projection, and I think that it's important that the board start to adopt that language in the use of talking about future projects, and that there's nothing that's guaranteed, and that it's incumbent upon the board to use our capital dollars where we most desperately need it, as opposed to, following a list. So I want to make sure that the public understands that this doesn't mean that one thing is necessarily happening in a certain period of time. It's merely a list of schools, and you're not projecting that there's a time associated necessarily with this change. You're just documenting that Falls Church is obviously one of our legacy schools that needs to be renovated, correct?
Unfortunately, I'm not putting a time on it.
Hashtag agree.
Okay, I have Mrs. Smith to be followed by Mrs. McLaughlin next. Mrs. Smith.
I will support the amendment, but I think I have a different viewpoint and discussions about the board about what it means in the cash flow sheet. Because one of the things that the board has talked about is that once a school gets named in the cash flow sheet and we've made the commitment to those dollars to the community, that we've agreed that we're not going to pull those schools out of the list. So I do think it's important that you get Falls Church listed in the cash flow sheet, and these are projects that we're working on, so they're there. Because the board will, at some time in the future, look at a new independent engineering review to look at our list of schools to see if the list should change. So I think this is important since Falls Church is the next high school, it's in this list. But there is a commitment from the board, from the schools that are listed, that we will complete those schools before we move on to new ones. Thank you.
Mrs. McLaughlin, to be followed by Mrs. Strauss.
I just wanted to say to the Falls Church community that as someone who I worked really hard with the Woodson Renew effort when we were having challenges with the CIP and whether we were going to be pulled back on the queue and being a legacy high school, what was happening. And your work and your effort has been extremely helpful to me as a board member, and I believe to my colleagues, in helping us truly understand the conditions at Falls Church High School, and as a community, how important it is for you to know that we're listening. And I know that Mr. Plattenberg, in charge of facilities, has been as supportive and responsive as he can be to make the facilities as best as possible for the children as they're there. But as we all know, that's not the same as getting renovated science laboratories and other facilities that are equitable and represent the incredible instructional facilities that we have throughout the county. So I lost several years of my family time as an advocate, and I look at all of you here tonight. I'm so appreciative on behalf of your communities, what you're doing for all children, and I just wanted to reinforce that tonight, while these are some baby steps, I think there's some important steps forward, but it's through your voice, your effort, and your dedication to our community that's making a difference, so thank you. And I'm very excited to support this motion.
Mrs. Strauss.
I will support the motion. Falls Church is indeed the next school that would be in the renovation list. However, I do think it's important that when we are establishing the appropriate order of need in the renovation list, that we depend on an outside engineering firm to make those determinations. And I think it is to the credit of school boards for a long time in Fairfax County that we have not allowed politics to enter into the determination of this list, that we have used engineers who have no connection to the schools, and neither staff nor school board members make this determination. So it is really an arm's length, because when, on the one hand, we don't have enough money to renew our schools when they should be. Langley High School will be 50 years old by the time their renovation begins next year, and Falls Church, their renovation is coming too late. All of these schools are. And so I don't think it's an issue that somehow the engineers have made an error. I think it is our lack of funding. So I do support naming Falls Church. I know they are eager to get in line, and I certainly would hope that we will at some point be able to get more money so that we can actually get to these schools in a more timely way. It is deserving of the schools, and it would be the right thing to do for our students. So I will support the motion. Thank you.
Any other board member before I do go back to Mrs. Reed? Mrs. Reed.
Thank you, Chairman Moon. I certainly have quite a bit to say about Falls Church. I was assuming that this particular amendment would be very straightforward, but there are certainly a number of issues, as some of my colleagues have begun to raise. But regarding this particular amendment, I think it is very straightforward in that it's just naming the school, and certainly it is a small baby step to the folks who have been advocating for quite some time. So I just would like to ask my colleagues if we could move forward on this one, and then we can start raising and discussing some of the other very important related issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Reed. With that, let me call for the vote. Mrs. McLaughlin.
Because this is a public meeting, and I think it's important when the public is listening that all of us on the board, we have our dialogue with each other out in the public. And so with Ms. Strauss talking about politics, I think it's important that if there is any misunderstandings that we're not only clear with each other, but with the public. And so my comments weren't at all about politics or implying that if people come out and lobby hard enough that they can manipulate the CIP. I think instead what it means is that as a community, when we work in partnership with each other, that every system has things they can learn from that they maybe didn't consider or weren't aware, and quite frankly, things we can do better. And so my remarks were simply that to the community, that you have actually strengthened and improved our work. But you're also going to hear tonight that some of us on the board do have concerns about the priorities on the CIP. This isn't about questioning professionals. This isn't about saying people didn't do their jobs. But it is saying that as a board, we want to be sure that the things that we have communicated to the school system that are important in terms of the engineers assessing priorities, that they reflect the community values. And so I, again, want to just say that there's nothing political about this at all. And I get concerned when I hear any of my colleagues think that I would imply otherwise, because I think that would undermine the faith that the community has in our board. It's never been politics, but I do think our community provides value to our work.
Okay, thank you. With that, let me call for the vote on the amendment, which is to amend fiscal year 2015 through 2019 capital improvement program to change the project listed in the high school renovations category, parenthesis, page 13, following Marshall, Jefferson, Langley, Worcester, Springfield, Herndon, and Oakton, parenthesis, from renovation one school to First Church High School. All those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. The vote is unanimous. The motion passes. Back to the main motion as amended. Ms. Evans?
Is it time for
You
my
want to speak
follow-on
on your
motion?
main motion? Yes, please. I'm sorry, there was a Mr. McAdam, but we are back to the main motion. Is there anyone who wants to speak on the main motion? On the CIP? Okay, if not, we'll call for the vote. On the main motion. Okay, we have Mrs. McLachlan.
Because of the process tonight and how we're doing this, I'm not sure if the public has the information in front of them, but there are going to be some follow-along motions, amendments, and I just wanted to speak to the fact that while we'll be voting on this CIP this evening, there are several of us on the board who were talking about whether or not it would have been better to simply postpone the vote tonight on the CIP altogether. That when we look at some of the questions that remain in some of our minds, and this board by precedent has done that before at the board table. They've put forward an amendment or a motion right then and there to postpone till time certain. And I wanted to be able to share that for anyone who's looking at this CIP, that we are going to actually hopefully have some additional work on this, because I think that there are broader issues here with relation to the CIP, but in deference to Mr. Plattenberg especially, we certainly don't want to create obstacles for the important work that needs to get done with this CIP, but I didn't want this vote to go through and people not think that there aren't issues that this board would like to consider in greater depth. And I wanted my colleagues to be aware of that, because I only had this conversation today with a few of them, and I wanted to make sure everybody understood my concerns.
Okay. I have Mrs. Church to be followed by Ms. Evans next. Mrs. Church.
I'm betwixt and between on the capital improvement plan that's before us. On the one hand, I think that in a year's time since Mr. Plattenberg has become head of facilities and transportation, I have personally seen a tremendous amount of transparency and accountability come to the CIP, and I'm very grateful for that. I've worked very closely with the facility staff on a number of issues, and I'm grateful for that, but I'm also surprised with things like elementary schools showing up in the western end of the county when we have a facility in my district that remains unused, and I have overcrowded facilities and children now in trailers who were formerly in brick and mortar schools. So on the one hand, we have grave capital needs in this county, and I have said from day one that if we don't get our capital needs and our demographic projections straight, everything else afterwards is wrong. The number of teachers, the number of buses, the number of employees, the number of books, everything else we have is wrong if we don't have, if we don't plan for the right number of kids and we don't have facilities. The second concern I have, and that I have raised for almost 2 years, is the use of, the exclusive use of SAC space in our elementary schools, and that could comprise up to 6,000 seats in our elementary schools. And I know, and I'm proud of the work that we are doing with the Board of Supervisors, but I don't have a clear handle on where our MOU stands. And we're about to talk about a budget that has been put forward by the superintendent that increases class sizes, which is particularly painful at the elementary level. So the CIP does many things right, and much better than I think have ever been done. But in my particular district, I'm concerned that a vote for it is a tacit approval of everything in it. And so I'm disinclined to vote for it, but it's not for the lack of the effort on the part of the facilities and staff, transportation staff, and the tremendous yeoman's work that they've done with our new superintendent in moving us forward. It's more of a statement that we're not there yet, and particularly in my district. I too think that we've got to very quickly vet whether or not we're going to have and where another high school. Ms. Smith and I share Centerville High School, which is grossly overcrowded, and I'm concerned for the feeder schools into there, because that's not a place that we can expand. So, I just, when people watch us vote, sometimes they don't understand the thought process behind, and if we're not cavalierly approaching these votes. And I think sometimes we need to seriously explain why we vote for, against, or sometimes abstain, and it has nothing to do with the work that staff has done.
Okay, I have a Ms. Evans to be followed by Mrs. Reed. Ms. Evans.
I'm glad I'm following Mrs. Schultz because I agree with virtually all that she said. I have grave concerns about our program here. Again, not because of anything that is to be faulted by our staff, who works, they work tremendously hard to do way too much with way too little. And it is incumbent upon us to find a way to get another funding stream so we can start doing more of what we absolutely must do in our facilities. We are working on that with the Board of Supervisors. Mrs. Smith and Mrs. Reed and I are participating in that, and I hope something that will yield not just conversation, but some real plans. I will say, I was very disappointed. Mrs. Reed and I had another amendment that we had planned to put forth on behalf of Falls Church High School. It ran into technical difficulties that we learned of last night. Both Mrs. Reed and I think Mrs. Reed is going to speak to this, are severely disappointed that we are not able to offer an amendment to put planning funds specifically for Falls Church High School into this CIP. I think it's critical that we get started on that school. We have heard over and over again about the critical needs of Falls Church High School with the science labs and the lack of sprinklers and the the little theater having been turned into a computer lab for lack of room elsewhere. So I had hoped we could at least have that conversation and have an opportunity to vote on that, but we won't have an opportunity to do that tonight. As I do think there are many larger issues that we as a school board have to discuss with our facilities needs, not just the funding stream, but also how we approach it. The FPAC has come to us with a different approach, and that's something that we have to discuss. They've said, look at boundaries, look at expansions, look at renovations before we go forth with new construction, and that's something that we need to have a conversation with. After we vote on the CIP, there are two follow-on motions that I think are critical to moving forward. One in terms of our legacy high schools, and another in terms of some of the larger issues that Mrs. Reed has put forth as well. I'm hopeful that when we come back a year from now, that we will be much farther along, both in this discussion and where we are with our legacy high schools. So as far as our conversation on the queue, we need to have that conversation. Not tonight necessarily, but at some point we need to review that and see if we really are where we want to be.
I have a Mrs. Reed to be followed by Ms. Hines and Mrs. Smith. Mrs. Reed.
Oh, I'm so happy to be following Ms. Evans because she is just being so articulate tonight. I don't want to repeat things that she has said, but right now this discussion, just so people can follow it, is really now about the CIP and whether we can vote for it or not. And similar to Ms. Schultz, I have some reservations about the content of this document, not because of staff, because staff did exactly what the board asked them to do. But then when we hear people like FPAC saying, gosh, you know, the plan that's in here isn't going to help your enrollment and capacity challenges. So that gives me great pause. On the other hand, we tried to say, look, let's take some time. Let's have discussions about Falls Church, about what FPAC has had to say, about the priorities that we have spelled out. But we don't have time to do that. This document and the plans have to get to the county, and they have to begin their funding process. So we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place here, but want people to understand the thought processes. We all have been talking and working behind the scenes, very long and hard discussions, also with staff, want to compliment them. But this document here, I think the major disappointment for me is that Falls Church is no further along than it was before. And even though we've had people come to us, we've had discussions about issues about perhaps an incorrect assessment or getting penalized for special programs that are there. And you know, let's just throw it right out there. That school has high poverty, and that's one of the ones that won't be renovated for years and years. I mean, that to me, that should be something that we should be discussing as a group. I mean, that to me, that's one of the last schools that should be waiting and waiting. And it also has very high folks who transfer out for a variety of reasons. I said I didn't want to open the can of worms, but I guess it's open now. And these folks, I think, have valid concerns, and I think they've been frustrated because they feel like, yes, in some cases, those concerns have been heard, but at the end of the day, we're still way back in the queue. And yes, it is our job to represent Falls Church, but that is all of our schools. Right? I mean, we have the duty to step back and look at what's best for all of our schools, given this finite pot of money that we have today. And later on, as Ms. Evans alluded, we did make some changes to our approach, and I apologize for that. I had hoped to be able to offer the amendment to take the $10 million that was set aside for a new high school in the western part of the county and try to be creative and say, we need that money more to begin planning and doing a feasibility study of what we have at Falls Church, but for a variety of reasons, staff has said that that is just not feasible. For one thing, it ends up bumping other projects, and that is a value I think that currently that we share, that the way things are today, that is the queue is the queue, the list is the list. Now that's not saying I agree with it, but I understand my colleagues feel very strongly, and that's a value that that is coming forward loud and clear. So at the end of the day here, I think back to where we are, and that is, do we vote for this document or don't we? I mean, I don't know what our option is, really. I mean, we could say, okay, we're going to vote for it, and then I'm going to plead with my colleagues to look seriously and consider these other amendments, because I really feel that if we do end up passing this document, we need to have some serious discussions before the next one is developed, and I'll be raising some of those issues here shortly. But I have to say I'm really on the fence about this, but at the end of the day, on the principle of it, I feel like, gosh, I shouldn't say yes. On the other hand, practically speaking, staff and the county officials need something to move forward with, and it would be irresponsible to kind of pull this out and say, nope, not good enough. So I'm just sharing all this with you because I feel like it's important for you to understand that we struggle with these issues, and everything is complicated. Nothing is straightforward. So now I know that I've gone way past my time, but I think it's important for people to understand. Thank you.
I have Mr. Hines to be followed by Mrs. Smith.
Thank you. I think we're getting to where we're all going to talk, right? Is that our plan? Well, I also, I guess, want to make sure that the community understands something about the CIP that we've talked about a little bit, but I think it's coming. FPAC talked to us about it, and it's something that we have to be ready to talk about, I think, is there may be some boundary changes down the road. That's the reality, when we get to a point. And 3 years ago when I was knocking on doors running for this job, I heard from people out in Herndon who were still mad because they had been redistricted, 8 years ago, and then again 4 years after that. So nobody likes it, everybody hates it, right? But it becomes almost a seismic thing, If you don't make little changes in boundaries, then you end up with anomalies, which we see, where we have capacity in one school and right next door overcrowding. I think we also see that happening because of programs, instructional programs. Those have unintended consequences. And so both of those things, I think, are coming as part of this CIP. I think this is a responsible document because it is responding to the reality that we're living in, where we don't have enough. We just don't have enough resources to do what we need to do. We've had tremendous growth. We've got 900 classrooms in trailers right now, right? We are years behind on our renovation queue. And I want to thank very much the school board members and board of supervisors members who are working together to try to make, real changes in that, to look at it strategically, because I'm sure there are creative solutions that we just haven't found yet. And also thanks to FPAC, our Facilities Planning Advisory Committee, citizens who've been working on this and are very knowledgeable, and they have given us honest guidance, and we need it. But I think I definitely will support this because I think it is an honest response and a responsible response to the reality of where we are now. But we have more work to do as a community, and we know that.
Okay, thank you. I think the number of trailers we have exceeds 1,100. The last count was Mrs. Smith, to be followed by Mr. Stork.
Thank you, Chairman Moon. I think the biggest challenge we face with this capital improvement program is it's apparent that we can't keep up with our need with our aging facilities and growing by thousands of students a year. And we do need to find more revenue. The Infrastructure Finance Committee that has 3 supervisors and 3 school board members on it, there is information that you can get through our webpage or through the county webpage. And there was a great presentation by our staff that really showed what we spend when we build things, how we've cut those costs, how we compare to districts in the area and nationwide. We're not out there building palaces and spending tons of money on schools. Our staff is very strategic to stretch the dollars as far as they can. There are not enough dollars to accomplish this work. We do need the community to be educated about that and help us advocate for these schools that draw all of us here. But there's part of this discussion that bothers me to my core. And I do agree with Mrs. Strauss that the board is talking about politicizing a process that we haven't done before. Because staff has not decided what buildings get renovated, and board members have not decided. And all those years when Woodson wanted to get renovated, it just took time to come up in the queue. And I do not have the expertise to walk into any school building and say the needs in that building are greater than the needs in another building. And this board has made a commitment to use independent engineering firms. We set out the standards for what they should look at out in the schools and to come up with a list of what we should renovate. And this is some of the feedback we got from the Facilities Planning Advisory Council, and what the board talked about was that when we name a school in our capital improvement program, we've made a commitment to that school that it would get renovated, that the work would happen in that school. I'm very concerned when we start to say, because we hear from a community that its needs are greater than others, that we react to that. Because we have a majority of the community that's out there that looks at this, that looks at a bond, that looks at what they voted on, what we said we were going to do, and they trust us to do that. My community doesn't know that we would be talking about changing the renovation of, say, Rocky Run. By the time that school gets renovated for the first time, it'll be 40 years old. And therein lies the danger when the board starts to talk about pushing somebody in front of somebody else. So I will vote for this document. I think it completes a promise that we've made to the community. It takes care of the schools that we had looked at independently for their needs, because the needs of a building aren't apparent to your eye just walking around in the building.
Yeah, those in the audience, I just want to remind you that we are conducting a business meeting. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Chairman Moon. So I will support this document, and I hope that as the board moves forward, that we consider all those aspects and the parts of the community that doesn't come here to speak to us too, and to protect their needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other board member who hasn't spoken? I have a Mr. Stork next. And then any other board member who hasn't spoken yet want to speak before I do go backs? Okay, I have a Mr. McElveen. Mr. Stork and Mr. McElveen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple comments. One is that we don't have enough money, and anybody who doesn't know that by now, I'm sorry, you've not been listening to us for years, but we don't fund our capital improvement budget. We take the funds that we have available and we disperse them as best we can. It's inadequate. It's been inadequate for many years. If you agree with that, or you believe that somehow or other there's something else that can be done, then please communicate with us. But we have X amount of dollars, and we spend those as best we can. And much of our discussion is where do we spend that money, and it is trying to stretch those dollars. The only way we get more money is if our state elected officials decide that more will be allocated either to capital improvement or to schools in general. Our funding level for schools overall is less than what it was in 2007 from the state. So we're working with less dollars from the state than we got in 2007, and we have about 20-some thousand more students. The other part of that is our Board of Supervisors. We get a substantial part of our money, and frankly all of our capital money comes from them. If you believe that we need more money for capital improvement, you need to communicate with your Board of Supervisors member and let them know your concerns. And then we work as best we can with the dollars that we have. So please do that. We recognize that we're frustrated by it, We can allocate what we get, and we do that, but it's not ever going to be adequate to the needs that we see, particularly in terms of the growth that we're experiencing. That growth means that we have to spend more money on building new classrooms in order to reduce the number of trailers. So far, we've done a poor job of that. This board gets an F in terms of trailer results, or maybe I should make it the other way, an F, and that's inadequate. That's not something I'm very proud of at all. 1,100 trailers, no, that's not what we want. We are taking the money that we have. In the Richmond Highway area, this allows for 6 renovations in the Richmond Highway area. Those renovation dollars will be spent for new facilities, new classrooms. They could also be spent for a new school. At this point in time, that's really what needs to be determined, and we need a comprehensive engagement in the Richmond Highway area, the Route 1 area, in order to be able to do that. And it will mean not only new classrooms, but also mean program changes in order to take the limited classrooms that we have and spread those out as the most effective way possible, but also mean boundary changes. Most of it is at the elementary school level, but that will be a broader change for all of us. This document takes us to the next step in that process, but we have a long way to go, particularly for the folks in Lee Mount Vernon. We know that. Mr. Erna Koufax and I are working to try to make sure at least that process is a very comprehensive one, and one that's a lot of public engagement about it. And I appreciate our at-large members' involvement with that as well, and they have been. So thank you all.
Mr. McAdam.
Thank you, Mr. Moon. I won't repeat anything that's been said, but I do believe, with all due respect to my friend and Sully, that we can walk around our schools and see major issues. And the thing is, it's not limited to one school. It's not limited to 2. It's easily half of our schools. And as at-large members, I think my colleagues and I have seen that on our various tours. And when it comes to things like the queue, I do believe that this board has a responsibility when consultants overlook major things to take some oversight action. I don't think that's necessarily being political. It's being proper stewards of our schools. And while I certainly don't think this board is politicizing anything, nor should it, I do think that's potentially a danger. But when we have been approached by the community, when we've investigated things and see that there's a major issue, I do think it's the board's role to step in and do something.
Mrs. Strauss.
Thank you. I will vote for the CIP. I think my colleagues have all raised very thoughtful comments. Mr. Stork, I absolutely agree with you. We simply don't have enough funds to really do justice to all of our schools. The number of trailers is terrible. And for the community's information, the legacy high schools, including Falls Church that we're talking about, these are all schools that were built in the 1960s, and that's way too long. Many years ago, this board had set a guideline that said that schools should be renovated every 25 to 30 years. Well, we're renovating schools 50 years old or longer. Cooper Middle School, who's not very far up anywhere yet, was built in 1962, and they may be well over 60 years before we get to them. Clearly, there will have to be more boundary changes. You're right, Ms. Hines, we have to make the best use of all of our dollars. And it is frustrating. I thank my colleagues who are on the committee with the Board of Supervisors. I think it's is definitely a step forward. I'm beginning to hear in my community some citizens who are saying, you know, you really don't have enough money to do what needs to be done for all of our schools. And this is the first time I'm starting to hear that. So I hope those of you who are working on this committee will find some light at the end of the tunnel, because we do need to help our schools and all of our students. It's just simply there simply aren't enough funds to get to where we should be. So thank you.
Okay, now I'll go back. Mrs. McLaughlin, to be followed by Mr. Church.
I just wanted to make sure that we didn't miss an opportunity tonight, since we were talking about the broader CIP and we've talked about the needs, but I don't know if the cameras may pick this up, but the audience can see, but this is a chart that Fairfax County staff created for part of this discussion with the Board of Supervisors. And what the board chart basically shows you is that Fairfax County schools has about 81% of the square footage of facilities in this county. Fairfax County government has about 19% of the square footage. But when you look at the capital funding allotment, right now it breaks out that even though we have 81%, we only get 58% of that capital funding. They have 19% of the square footage, but they get 42% of the funding, of the capital funding. What that translates is if we did it actually by the square footage you have is the percentage you're going to get out of that capital funding, we would be getting $215 million versus the $155 million we get, and they would be getting $50 million versus the $110 million they get. And so I really wanted to help the public, especially as you're hearing us talk about it, because we need you to be part of this dialogue to say that it's not about the schools trying to take more than than our share, but it is trying to say the county as a whole, we really do need to be looking at how do you ensure that the bond dollars that we take out on behalf of this county are being directed in a way that will help all of our county facilities. And right now, from what I see in this chart, it's not equitable distribution, and that's also created an additional problem, I believe, for getting to the renovations and also the new building that we need to adequately provide the learning environments that our children need and deserve. So I also want to thank my colleague, Mr. McElveen, for his eloquence. I really appreciate you kind of just, I think, capturing what it is that we're all wrestling with, and because I think that we all have the same desire, which is to absolutely, treat every community fairly and equitably, but also to recognize that additional information is sometimes needed to make the best decisions, and as a board, that is what we're tasked with.
Okay, before I do go to Mr. Church, I think Mr. Velko, you haven't spoken, but you want to speak? Mr. Velko?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. McLaughlin, I'm pleased that you brought up the statistics that were produced by our staff and how they compare with the square footage comparison between schools in the county. I would advise us to avoid language like we and they. They no more walk in our shoes than we walk in theirs, or the other way around. I messed that one up. But I think that we want to understand that this is a holistic problem and needs a holistic solution, and I'm sure that you and all of my colleagues agree with that. I was wondering where to introduce this idea, and I think it's appropriate now that you've raised this question. And I'm going to float an idea and ask that the members of the Infrastructure Financing Committee take it forward if you like it. But imagine if the renovation queue were not simply divided between the county and the schools, but in fact we integrated the queue between the county and the schools, and we were to define criteria that would be approved by the two boards, and that criteria would then be reviewed by the consultant. Basically the process that we have in place, but it would combine the facilities question, and I think some of those concerns might be addressed. So I'll put that out there for everybody's consideration.
Mr. Church, next.
I agree with Mr. Velkoff. I'm thankful, and that's part of what my go back was to bring up the disparity. That's another one of the huge concerns that I have that we haven't had time to address. And I do also agree with Mr. Velkoff that we need to be very cautious about the we versus they. We are we. We, as a school board, represent the same 1.2 million Fairfax County residents that the Board of Supervisors do. We have different duties and different obligations, and we, the 12 of us sitting here, are constitutional officers under the state constitution and are charged with the obligation of running this school division with utmost efficiency. And utmost efficiency is not politicizing. And I take offense that questioning what staff brings and whether or not in the viewpoint of things like FPAC, which is chartered, and bringing us concerns, whether that which we have done for a very long time, namely the Q, has got us exactly where we are. And that's not politicizing, that's a fact. This is what we've done for a very long time, and we haven't dug ourselves out of the hole, and the hole's gotten worse. So I have, West Springfield High School, which was left off the queue. Whether that's, an independent consultant or not, I have a hurting community as a result of the governing process that this board has led by for a long time. And so I think that bringing new and innovative ways of thinking about how we use our capital dollars and being fiduciary statesmen under our obligation under the Constitution to our constituents when things are brought to our attention that Q or no, CIP or no, as a result of expanding student populations or aging legacy facilities, those need to be addressed, and we don't adhere to the Q because some independent consultant told us to. And we are charged with governing, and we are charged with leading, and that is never politicizing. And so I think we need to be very cautious about that. There was an attempt or thought by a few of us up here that we could potentially delay tonight's vote on the CIP to wait for some additional information. We don't want to hurt the school system and delay that because we were told that I believe it's Mr. Plattenberg, February 12th, that the county needs this by. And so we are backed into a position of do we pass something because time tells us we have to? And we sit up here as elected officials if we're just going to pass stuff just because the calendar tells us we have to pass it, then there's no point in us sitting in these chairs. Then just hire a superintendent and they slap together the stuff and they pass it over to the county and we move on. But I think that we're trying individually to represent our constituents in the way we best see fit and the information that we've received through our constituents to represent the school system, our constituents, and the county as a whole in a $2.5 billion organization. And if somebody votes against something, we're not voting against the school system. What we're saying is that we're taking very seriously our obligation under a capital needs that is underfunded or at least, as Mr. Stork pointed out and Ms. McLaughlin pointed out, disproportionately funded. And let me repeat those numbers because those are so critical that out of all of the square footage that is owned by either the county or the school system, we possess within the FCPS total square footage, 81% of the total square footage between the county and the school system. But we get 58% of the funding. That's grossly disproportional. And so, independent consultants or no, the burden falls to us as the elected officials to try to govern to the best of our ability, and that doesn't necessarily mean rubber stamping documents. And I think I've made my decision.
Mrs. Reed, next.
Thank you, Chairman Moon. Following on what Ms. Schultz said, just want to remind folks who are trying to follow the conversation that we're right now talking about the CIP document and whether to approve it. as is. And I guess this begs the question in my mind is what is the role of the board when it comes to this document? Do we have the authority to amend it if we so choose? Or in fact, are we just kind of tacitly saying, okay, we'll just take what the staff have given us? And I'll remind some of my colleagues, particularly Mr. Stork, that a few years ago we approved a project and funded it and it wasn't in the CIP at all. Do you remember that? The Lemon Road project? And I believe it was $3 million. But because, and we voted, the majority voted for it, it was because it was determined that that was a high priority and emerging need that needed to be handled right away. So we passed that. Where'd the money come from? No idea. But so here we are, fast forward, and so I'm wondering, is that a precedent? Should we be having a discussion about, before we pass this, are there emerging or higher priority needs than what are in this document? I think so. And so that is the dilemma. And I agree that we're kind of between a rock and a hard place in terms of the timing, but you know, it seems like that's where we always are. So I guess I would just ask people to reflect on that. I mean, I don't know how much time it would take to have those discussions, but probably longer than we have. So everyone will have to just vote their conscience in terms of whether or not they want this, you know, to go forward, and whether their vote speaks to some of these issues that we have been addressing. And hopefully we'll get to the rest of our amendments and motions and we can talk further. Thank you.
Okay, hopefully we can call for the vote on the main motion as amended, which is that school board approved FY 2015 through 2019 capital improvement program as described in the narrative and in the superintendent's proposed FY 2015 through 2019 capital improvement program summary, and as amended to change the project listed in the high school renovations category, page 13, following Marshall, Jefferson, Langley, West Springfield, Herndon, and Oakton from renovation one school to Falls Church High School. All those in favor of that motion, raise your hand. Strauss, McElvin, Smith, Delana Colfax, Moon, McLaughlin, Hines, Velkop, Stork. Those opposing? Schultz and Reed, abstaining, Evans. The motion passes. We have a follow-on motion from Ms. Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Moon. I move that the board approve the following resolution regarding the renovation of legacy high schools in Fairfax County. Whereas Fairfax County Public Schools has 5 legacy high schools built in the 1960s, which have not yet received complete renovations, including Langley High School, built 1965, partial renovation 1988. West Springfield High School, built 1966, partial renovation 1989. Herndon High School, built 1967, partial renovation 1991. Oakton High School, built 1967, partial renovation 1991. Falls Church High School, built as middle school 1960, repurposed as high school 1967, partial renovation 1988. And whereas the age and condition of the legacy high schools make it difficult to meet 21st century curriculum standards at the high school level, such as those involving science and computer labs, and whereas providing adequate technology and science facilities in FCPS high schools has long-term ramifications for student learning and college readiness, and whereas research shows that the quality of school facilities is a factor in student and teacher attendance, teacher retention and recruitment, child and teacher health, and the quality of curriculum, and whereas high school renovations eventually impact all students in a high school pyramid, and whereas FCPS strives to provide equitable opportunities for all students. Now therefore be it resolved that the Fairfax County School Board agrees that renovating the legacy high schools, Langley, West Springfield, Herndon, Oakton, and Falls Church, is a high priority of the capital improvement program, and that FCPS shall work towards securing full funding for the renovations of all the legacy high schools by the 2017 bond. referendum. I so move.
Is there a second? Seconded by Mrs. Reed. Ms. Evans, you want to speak on your motion right now, or you would rather wait?
I want to, here's what I'd like to do, and I want to explain to both my colleagues and to members of the audience. I'm now going to ask that an amendment be approved by the board before we continue on. I could have simply brought in a different motion, but because the motion I just read was the one that was posted, I wanted everyone, both the board members and members of the public, to see what we're doing. I have amended the resolved phrase here, and what I would move that the motion that I just read be amended thusly. I move to strike.
Okay, Ms. Evans, before I'll call on you, don't worry.
All right.
So you're not going to speak on your motion you just made. Mrs. Reed, just a second, you want to speak on that motion, or you would like to wait until they get further?
I'll wait, thank you.
Okay, thank you. With that, Ms. Evans, I'll call.
Okay.
You have an amendment.
I move to strike the last paragraph of the resolution and replace it with the following paragraph. Now therefore be it resolved that the Fairfax County School Board directs staff to identify methods by which renovations could be completed sooner at the legacy high schools, Langley, West Springfield, Herndon, Oakton, and Falls Church, and to present those options to the board no later than July 2014, along with an assessment of how updating high school facilities impacts instruction.
Is there a second? Second by Mrs. Reed. Ms. Evans, now you want to speak on your amendment.
Yes, and actually, Mr. Moon, if I might, rather than, I would appreciate it if the board would approve this amendment and then have the discussion of the amended version of my resolution.
I certainly understand that your wish, but that's assuming that this amendment will pass, correct?
That is assuming, and if the amendment doesn't pass, then I will speak to the underlying motion.
Okay, all right, thank you. And I'm going to have to give board members, whoever want to speak on your amendment, to speak. So with that, Mrs. Reed.
Okay, trying to follow that. Okay, I would like to speak now because I want to try to persuade people about this amendment and why it's important. The board has certain values that we've articulated. One is equity. And remember the full day K discussion. We wanted to make sure that all the schools were given the same quality of instruction, the same opportunities. I feel that in this particular case, we really need to discuss the educational equity for all high schools. Should we have state-of-the-art facilities and instructional spaces for all, particularly the legacy, the oldest high schools, and that includes programs for science, computers, and music. And offerings, should we be offering similar courses and the amounts of courses in the schools where it makes sense to do so? In other words, don't get penalized because of where you live. And I know that's something that we talk about as a board also. Eric from SOAR sent some very good comments to all of us today, and I want to just paraphrase quickly the importance of moving forward, looking at the legacy high schools. As we know, our kids, when they graduate, are competing for competitive slots in colleges, or they're competing in a competitive job market. It's important that all of our schools be up to the same level of quality of education. And this is much more than just about buildings, and I think we all recognize that quality of educational services and the quality of the facility have become intermeshed, as they should be. But this board has often talked about those two in vacuums, as if somehow they aren't related, and they certainly are. And you know, it's also about much bigger issues about economic growth and the health of communities. The school is in the center. And so I think that we need to acknowledge that. And so all I'm saying right now to my colleagues is, for many reasons, these legacy high schools should all be offering the same types of educational services to the students and to the communities. And I urge you to support this amendment and agree to have us discuss further. Thank you.
Mr. Church?
Yes, and I want to thank, first of all, Ms. Reed and Ms. Evans for putting this together, but I did spend time talking with Ms. Reed, and I'm very pleased to see this amendment because I was very reticent about the resolution as it stood. And the thing that's great about this amendment, and in substitute for the previous, is the previous sounded good. And I had community members, particularly West Springfield parents, who were happy to support this and wanted support of this. But the problem was is the resolution as it stood is just a resolution. And I think it's the bad kind of governing and the bad kind of politics of doing the effort to pass things that sound really great and tangibly do nothing. And I don't think that that's good governance, and I don't think it's good leadership. What this amendment does is it moves thoughts and words into action. In my personal vernacular, it gets us to yes. It says we choose to direct something to happen rather than this is how we feel. How we feel is a 12 different variations on a theme, but it doesn't direct something to happen. And we have 190,000 kids, 39,000 employees, and $2.5 billion, and platitudes are not good leadership. So I'm very thankful that we moved into action here, which is saying that we can no longer continue the policies of the way the board has addressed capital needs. There are legacy schools that, for whatever reason, we find ourselves in a position where minor overhauls since 1966 or 67, kind of about my age. I've had more than my share of attention over the years, and if we allow our capital facilities to go that long, what it does is it costs us more money in the long run and allows us to always be playing short ball. And it is very important to my colleagues that we not talk about being strategic, that we act strategically. And this amendment, if moved into the resolution above, allows us to move from a position of talking about doing things to being actually strategic in our leadership of this division. And I'm happy to support it.
I have Ms. Hines to be followed by Mrs. Rouse and Mrs. McLaughlin. Ms. Hines.
I'm sorry, Ms. Evans, did you want to speak first?
I'll put her on the list, so Ms. Hines, go ahead.
Sorry. Anyway, well, thank you. And I appreciate all the work you've done. You've talked to all of us, this week, and it's frustrating that we're talking about this like this, in a way. For me, it's frustrating because this is a conversation we have to have, but I don't think this is how we should have it. When I look at that resolution, I could take out a few words and fill in other words, right? I could say we direct staff to identify methods by which additions could be completed sooner at the following schools. Or we direct staff to identify methods by which new buildings could be completed sooner in the following communities that really need one. And that's the problem with this whole conversation. This bumps certain schools ahead of others. It does. It bumps certain schools ahead in the queue of resources because this will take resources. This will take time. And we're basically saying that we are setting a new priority when we have not talked about that, to my mind, in the proper way. I'm not against the idea that this is political, because if politics is public conversation, then we do need to have that conversation, but we haven't had it yet. I feel like, I think there's a lot of good conversation here right now, but I feel like I owe it to my constituents in Hunter Mill to have this conversation with them. I don't want to support this because I'm almost certain that someone in Hunter Mill will pull me aside in the next couple weeks and say, you know, we've been waiting. We've been waiting for our addition. We've been waiting for our 10-room modular to be, you know, to be put here because we're sick of all the, you know, the trailer park behind the building. We've been waiting for program changes, you know, here in our community that will help our facilities issues. So it is past time, I think, that we had a conversation about our priorities when it comes to the CIP and the renovation queue and the whole queue in general. But I don't feel like this is a responsible way to have that conversation because my constituents didn't know I was going to be talking about it tonight. And I don't know how they would. You know, this is a conversation that needs a lot of public engagement, and we haven't done it. We need to.
Okay, before I go to Mrs. Strauss, let me just point out a few things. Looking at the language of the motion, I do not think we are talking about bumping. I do not think we are talking about actually committing to do anything. This is asking staff to bring to the board different options, potential options to consider. So let's keep that in mind, hopefully. With that, Mrs. Strauss and Mrs. McLaughlin.
Thank you. First, thank you, Mrs. Evans, for your willingness to change the language of this motion because the original language I would have had a hard time supporting. I will support, because what this does is it continues our conversation, and I know there will be another motion to have a work session, which is fine because we need to continue to talk about this. And for those people who aren't on the inside track as to part of the difficulty with this, just to be updated, the high schools who have their funding and are under renovation now, Marshall and Jefferson. Langley was on the bond and they will begin their full renovation shortly. Planning for West Springfield, Herndon, and Oakton is already funded for planning. And of course, the tough part is that we've just named Falls Church, but there is no money yet allocated for them. And that, I know, that is tough. And we talk about legacy schools, and right now that means those are schools that were built in the 1960s. Before that, the legacy schools were those built in the 1950s. We have elementary and middle schools that were also built in the 1960s, and they're still in the list. And I think in fairness, so that everybody kind of understands who these other people are, because you're right, not everybody understands kind of the inside of the struggle that we're having. Some of the other schools that are named in the CIP and also are waiting is Mount Vernon Woods Elementary School, Bellevue Elementary School, Annandale Terrace Elementary School, Clearview Elementary School, Hughes Middle School, Silverbrook Elementary School, Hybla Valley, Cooper, which I said was built in 1962, that's very legacy, Frost Middle School, Wakefield Forest, Louise Archer, Crossfield, Mosby Woods, and of course, Falls Church High School. And I think we would love to fix all of these guys. They are all way overdue. So just so that those who aren't watching all the details of the struggle that we are having, but that is truly the struggle. So I will support this, and certainly the continued discussion of this is certainly what we're going to have to do. And I do hope that we come up with more money because there are a lot of schools that are waiting. Thank you.
I have Mrs. McLaughlin, to be followed by Mrs. Smith and Ms. Evans.
I just wanted to say that I really appreciated Chairman Moon providing the clarification that my read from this language is that we want this information brought to us, options to the board no later than July 14th, assessing how the updating of these facilities would impact instruction. But this information would certainly also help us understand what, if any impact it will have on the other schools that Ms. Strauss just listed for all of us. I will say that because my children are now in high school and middle school, so I've seen them come through Fairfax County Schools since kindergarten, the challenges with regard to our aging high schools, I believe presents a unique situation that is different from elementary and middle school. the facilities and the educational instruction is far more complex, especially when we talk about, our science labs, our computer labs, and what preparation those students need as they are about to enter into college or the workforce. And so, as someone whose child is at Frost Middle School right now, I got to tell you, I didn't even realize Frost needed to be on the list. It's been beautifully maintained, and not discounting that, renovations for all of our schools, as we've talked about now for over an hour, are greatly needed. But I would be very, very comfortable talking with my Braddock community and explaining why I would support an amendment like this tonight. And that, again, it's no definitive action, but we are helping the superintendent and staff with a direction of saying we want to, as Ms. Schultz said, start putting some actions to words. Tonight, part of the greatest difficulty we had about voting on the CIP is that I frankly felt we didn't have enough time as a board to have substantive discussions in the work sessions to really go through where we are as a board and as a system on our CIP plans. And we'll get to that in some upcoming motions. But I told Mr. Moon I'd be brief, and then they didn't even run the timer on me. So I'll just say, I hope my colleagues will understand that this is an important amendment, and I think that when you do look at what's happening to our legacy high schools, I think they are in a very unique category, and I think it's time we start taking some action.
I have a Mrs. Smith to be followed by Ms. Evans, Mr. Velkop, and Mr. Nakofax. Mrs. Smith.
Thank you, Chairman Moon. I really appreciate Mrs. Hines' comments because I think they represent a lot of my concerns. I can't support the amendment, and the other reason is I think we're putting the work in the wrong place. I don't think this is about staff coming to us and saying, how do we do it differently? I think what you're hearing here is a difference of opinion in the board and how we make decisions and what we need to do about how we renovate schools. So I think the first discussion that has to happen is us as colleagues to see where we're willing to make changes and where we're not, and come to a consensus about that. I think we're pushing work on staff because we haven't figured out how to have those discussions ourselves. So for those couple of reasons, I will not support the amendment.
Mr. Velkop, Ms. Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Moon. I guess we're discussing the amendment now. So I will let everyone know why I have offered this. I do want to first of all thank all of my colleagues for the conversations that we've had over the past few days. People have been extremely thoughtful in their conversations with both me and Mrs. Reed. And I apologize for the lateness, but I want people to know that we listened to them and took their thoughts and concerns into account and changed the amendment in order to deal with the concerns. The resolution, as amended, assuming it's amended, it addresses the needs of the 5 legacy high schools. These were high schools built in the 1960s. They've never been fully renovated. We do have many competing needs in our school system, but I do believe that the legacy high schools are in a separate category. It's a matter of educational quality and a matter of educational equity. Our high schools need updated science labs, they need computer labs, they need the latest technology to meet our educational standards. Without these, we put some of our high school students at a significant disadvantage compared to their counterparts in surrounding schools and in surrounding jurisdictions. Our high school students are competing with other students for jobs, competing with other students for college spots, globally and locally. So to have some of our students, our high school students, in superior facilities and others in antiquated, outdated ones simply isn't equitable. And of course, I am particularly concerned about Falls Church High School and how far away from a renovation this high school is now. I'm grateful that we've finally named them in the CIP, but we need to move all of our legacy high schools farther, faster, if we can find a way to do it. I also do see this as an equity issue for Falls Church High School. A majority of Falls Church High School students do qualify for free and reduced lunch. With 57%, they are the second highest percentage in Fairfax among Fairfax County high schools. To have our updated facilities, our modern facilities for our needier students is imperative to their learning, and it's an obligation of this board to provide that for our neediest students, to provide those opportunities, especially for those students. This resolution does recognize the importance of the legacy high schools. At the same time, it gives us an opportunity to take a thoughtful approach as to how to deal with our renovation backlog. Hopefully, when we come back at this in July or before July, we will have some creative ideas on how we can accomplish this without slowing down other renovations that are waiting patiently as well. This gives us some time to mull this over and to also be thoughtful about the recommendations that FPAC has brought to us. We have heard numerous issues from all of our schools, from all of our legacy high schools, and we have commiserated with them over the years. We have told them we are going to be looking for ways to help you. It is time to do that now.
Okay, I have two more board members, Mr. Velkop, TV5, Mr. Fairfax.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to pose a question or two to Mr. Plattenberg, but first I want to thank you for clarifying your understanding of the language. I concur. I think it's not committing this board to any particular action or outcome that Ms. Hines feared, although we certainly would have the opportunity, perhaps in July, to do such things. Mr. Plattenberg, please forgive me if I'm putting you on the spot, but I think we've had conversations. So what this language says, as I understand it, is basically we're asking your staff to come up with some options. And I have two questions. One is I'd just like to get an idea of what your understanding of options means. And then the second one is any description you could make in terms of the amount of effort that this is calling on you. It's very easy for us to invent work and toss it over the fence, and I just kind of want to gauge just what the impact on you and your staff would be to prepare for this. So may I ask you, so let's go first of all for what's your interpretation as you read it right now of what options are?
Well, in review of that, Mr. Velkop, I see it really just kind of twofold. Is really to come up with potential options for the school board to consider. And in review of the language that I read here, in the spirit of the conversation, to ensure that there isn't to create a conflict at this point with the intent of any queuing, I believe it would be to look at, in working with ISD about current program offerings, how they're being delivered, current renovated schools, how certain spaces, we mentioned science specifically, in the programmatic areas, to really take a look at what the difference may be. And I think that delta would point out some, if there were discrepancies, it would at least highlight and identify that, and I think that would be informative. But the other thing is, though, I think if I'm going through options, I think it would be incumbent upon me also to put the ones that have really been articulated and discussed by this entire body, that to which is about the funding and the funding availability and the funding component, because, I mean, clearly stated, there is an infrastructure issue that is broader than just one school, to the points that have been made. So I really see it as taking a look at different scenarios and different options and bringing them without having any blinders on, but with the understanding and the intent that it isn't really to create conflict, that it's for the purpose of delineating and identifying the issues that may be prevalent, if there are, and also I don't believe in just identifying problems, but also having recommended solutions, and that's where it gets a little more challenging or sporting for me. And then to your second question.
Yes, and I thank you. I wasn't trying to, and I don't want anybody to think, or don't want you to think I was asking you to, answer this question on the fly. So basically, what you're saying is, in addition to potentially reordering projects, there could be an option. Might be something like changing the program offerings in schools, for instance, or maybe looking at spot repairs here and there. Okay, so the second question was, how much work does this look like from your standpoint? Is it above and beyond the work that you would do normally to prepare for any work session that we would have scheduled for the board?
I think that really comes down to the level of granularity. I think there are a couple things that have come up that really caused me a bit of pause. And that is, if the intent is to go ahead and have discussions that go beyond the broader construct of the Q and the Q components, which I can't help but think would be one of the things that I look at, both sides of the spectrum. If I were to make a recommendation of potential options, I would have to include some of what may be the less desirable but more obvious, and then to say to re-examine that, which would be an option. If the body would choose, the majority of the body would choose to go down that road, I think Ms. Hines' points on that are pretty much spot on. That would have to be a part of the recommended options. But with anything else, our purpose is to move the dialogue further, to get to whatever yes may be, and to provide enough information for informed decisions to be made. So to that end, I just say, don't worry about the horses, just let up the cart.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Berghoff. I have Mr. Anakovacs next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank Ms. Evans, actually, for updating this language since I initially spoke to you. I appreciate Mr. Plattenberg's comments because I do feel, as you wrote it, Ms. Evans, is that you ask staff to identify methods by which renovations could be completed. So this is language that will allow us to have options. Whatever staff gives us, it will allow us to, the opportunity to have that dialogue that I think we need, other than what I had spoken to you about before, where it was originally written. If people had seen that, there would be a place over, placing priority over one type of school over the other. And I think that is where we need to have that greater, deeper conversation so all of those concerns, for those of us that have those, and the things that Ms. Strauss pointed out and the things that Ms. Hines pointed out. So as your amended substitute, I would be able to support that tonight, and I thank you for working very hard to get that done. Thank you.
Seeing the other hand, let me call for the vote. We are on the amendment from Ms. Evans, which is to strike the last paragraph of the resolution and replace it with the following paragraph. Now therefore be resolved that the Fairfax County School Board directs staff to identify methods by which renovations could be completed sooner at the legacy high schools, Langley, West Springfield, Hunden, Oakton, and First Church, and to present those options to the board no later than July 2014, along with an assessment of how updating high school facilities impacts instruction. All those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. Strauss, Evans, Schultz, McElvin, Ternakovacs, Moon, McLaughlin, Reed, Verkop, Stork. Those opposing, Smith, and abstaining is Hines. The motion passes. Now we are back to the main motion as amended. Ms. Evans, you want to speak on your main motion? Well,
I do not.
Okay, we could certainly, unless I see a hand, we could dispense with a further discussion on this main motion as amended. We just need to vote one more time. Yes, Mr. Church.
I just want to address one thing that was brought up in the previous discussion after I'd finished speaking, and it's the question of elementary schools being old. And I don't think, and it's not that there aren't schools that need to be renovated, but I don't think we're on the same par, as Ms. Evans brought up, in the equity of delivering, especially as we focus as a board on the portrait of a graduate, of delivering a commensurate education from facility to facility. Now, I've always maintained that a facility doesn't teach a student, but being in reading class in 3rd grade in a 1950s building is not the same as trying to take 11th grade AP chemistry in a 1950s building. So those are two vastly different things, and we owe those legacy high schools that have not been renovated the effort. And as this resolution originally stood, you know, I was betwixt and between, as I said, about whether to pass this, because it was only about how the board felt. But now that we've added the amendment, and we are now in a position as the board, which is our role to do, whether, with all due deference, Mr. Plattenberg, you know, if that's on your plate or not, you know, the point is that if the board finds that we have compelling reasons to access additional data to help us make good governance decisions with things like legacy high schools, then that's what the board should do. I mean, that's about priorities. And so I'm very pleased and proud of us as colleagues that we passed the amendment. I'm hoping that we do similarly, but, you know, collapsing anything that we can. I mean, a school going through 3 solid years of renovation, you know, is a daunting thing for any school to face. You know, Woodson already went through it. Marshall's going through it. TJ's going to go through it. West Springfield, you know, which is so far behind because they were left off, you know, anything that we can do to compress this time. So this is merely asking the staff for data, and I think this is good for us to separate the difference of delivering, you know, 21st century STEM and dynamic programs through CTE or otherwise in a portrait of a graduate, qualified, worthy school from school to school around the county. And we shouldn't be relegating, whether it's Falls Church or West Springfield or any of these schools, to just wait until the queue catches up, because that's the way we've always done it. So this is the start of looking at things in a different way, and looking for new potential options that could be presented to the board.
Thank you. With that, let me call for the vote on Mrs. Evans' main motion on the resolution as amended. If you allow me, I would like to dispense with the reading the entire motion. Seeing no objection, let me call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion as amended, raise your hand. Strauss, Evans, Schultz, McElvin, Terranova, Moon, McLaughlin, Reed, Verkop, Stork, opposing, Smith, and Hines. The motion passes. Let me call Mrs. Reed for another follow-on motion.
Thank you, Chairman Moon. I move that the board schedule a work session by April 30th, 2014 to discuss key policy issues associated with the CIP prior to the development of the FY 2016 through 20 CIP.
Second. Seconded by Mr. Schultz. Mrs. Reed, you want to speak on motion? Let me just remind the board members that I don't want to shortcut any board discussion on this, on any of the motions, but as you know, we have another work session after the regular meeting. Let's keep that in mind. Mrs. Reed.
Yes, sir. As we've alluded to tonight, there are many policy issues associated with this capital improvement program document. It's not just about individual schools, and really the role of this board is to focus on the policy issues as well as how the resources are being expended. So I'm going to take us from our 10,000-foot discussion up to about 100,000 feet to give you some examples of some of the policy issues that I believe we as a board have not yet discussed and resolved. One is the issue of how do we handle old buildings. This document really doesn't get into that. For example, the Graham Road, the old Graham Road, I was originally thinking about preparing an amendment to kind of push forward a renovation and bring that back into use, but had some very fruitful discussions with staff and agreed that perhaps the community use in the shorter term is the better option until we kind of see exactly how the numbers are going to play out. But my point, using that as the example quickly, is to just say that I believe that we should have at least a page in this document that would indicate here's our old buildings. We've got Pimmett, Clifton Elementary, the Dunn Loring, and Graham Road, and maybe there are others, but I'm hopeful that staff can determine whether or not it's worth or even practical to put in this document or in the future. But to me, when we're talking about buildings, we should be talking about all of our buildings. Especially if we're resource constrained, we should be really creative about our discussions about how we're using these spaces and if that makes the most sense. Here's some other policy issues that I'll just read through very quickly, and this is probably one of the biggest ones. How responsive and malleable should the CIP be to currently identified needs? And that we've talked about here tonight, whether or not it's appropriate to throw out Lemon Road, even though it wasn't in here. When will we revisit the queue and the criteria? Do we feel that once it's in the queue, it's always in the queue forever and ever? To what extent should we strive to ensure educational equity across schools? Is quality of educational space more important for high schoolers preparing for careers in college than middle or elementary school students? What value do we place on legacy high schools? We need to have a discussion about the building of the new school, the new high school that is in the CIP, funded at $10 million. To what extent would it be more impactful to use these funds in other ways? FPAC, for example, said a new building should be our last resort. Some board members feel like we should be looking for property now, while the property values might be more advantageous. What proportion of the CIP should be renovation versus capacity enhancement versus maintenance? Is the current balance appropriate? Our FPAC advisors said absolutely not, that this document, in fact, does not recognize our capacity needs and is really focusing much more on renovations. Are there different ways to pursue renovations and enhancements? Another one, if we receive additional bonding authority, how and when will we decide how those funds are used? Some folks may say, well, we should just speed up the queue. Others might say, well, maybe we should think about that. We should at least have the discussion. And then the programmatic components that we talked about earlier, AAP expansion, the academies, other programs, governor's schools, use of our buildings by the county and programs like SAC. And so really taking a step back, again, at the very high level, looking at how our decisions about programs and facilities and budget really all need to be commingled and discussed together. And that is something very different, and I'm hopeful that if my colleagues will support this, we'll be able to have a more fruitful discussion about these and other issues, certainly not tonight, but at another time before April, which is the date that staff have indicated that they would need these policy issues resolved in order to impact the next version of the CIP. So that's where that date is coming from, and I work through with staff, and I appreciate that, as well as Ms. Goddard, who wasn't very happy with me, but was very responsive today, and I must thank her for that as well. I urge you to support this motion.
Our Madam Clerk is always happy with the board members, no matter what. Let's correct that. So, Mr. Schultz?
And what a wonderful lead-in. Thank you, Ms. Reed, for kind of flavoring the discussion with the types of things that could and should be discussed by the board. And by no means, I don't think, was that an exhaustive list. And let me add some other potential values and priorities that the board has not had a time to discuss. One is the size of schools. What is our value system as a board and as a community with the 1.2 million residents in Fairfax County? Do we just keep adding on to schools ad infinitum? To what point? You know, how big do you want your elementary schools? Is 1,000 elementary students in one building a good idea or not? Do we just keep growing and adding additions on to high schools? Until what point? You know, who says that maybe we shouldn't have more buildings, and maybe the Bailey's exercise should be a cautionary tale, but also allowed us to think outside the box. You know, in all the classrooms in 194.6 schools, our teachers ask our students all the time to think outside of the box. And if they were rigid and did things the way they always did them, we would not be developing dynamic learners. Well, I think you should expect the same from the board, and something called the queue has always been there. Well, we've wound up in a position that is not particularly advantageous and allows a perennial struggle by this board, the Board of Supervisors, and community against community about what do we do now? And maybe the conversation needs to change entirely. Maybe the queue needs to, I don't know, go away, different consultants, different stakeholders participating. Maybe that's how we don't wind up with legacy schools not being renovated. Maybe we have a different proportionality in the capital dollars that the Board of Supervisors and the school board share in our total square footage. So fundamentally changing the conversation may be necessary. Doing what we've always done has gotten us what we've always gotten. And so I think that Ms. Reed's amendment that we did spend time talking about, and I am thankful that staff was very nimble, just like I think that we ultimately need to be with some of our capital needs in addressing things to meet our constituents, our learning cottages. You know, what are our value systems as a board on learning cottages? Are modulars good, bad, indifferent? Do our children feel and do our parents feel safe, just that their kids are just as safe in, you know, a building that's, you know, 50 yards off the back of the building as they would if they're in a brick and mortar building? These are substantive, real life issues that aren't addressed by the document called the CIP right now. And I think that the values that Fairfax County puts on education are not necessarily reflected in the way that we've always done the business. And so we as a board need to have a cogent conversation. And I think this certainly puts a time frame on it and allows us to have time to talk to our constituents, but bring a little bit more reality to what we're experiencing in our capital needs.
I have Mrs. McLaughlin to be followed by Ms. Hines and Mr. McLevin. Thank you.
This follow-on motion is actually, to me, sort of the second best option we had tonight. As I mentioned earlier, I had spoken with some of my colleagues about voting against the CIP because I had concerns that we really hadn't, as a board, fully discussed the substantive issues that Ms. Schultz now has detailed. But in talking with Ms. Reed, I noted that we have to be very mindful of the calendar and the timeliness of when we have to get important documents over to our board of supervisors. So this motion is, in my mind, the compromise, because I don't want to see us doing this again with next year's CIP. I want to, as both Ms. Reed and Ms. Schultz have said, have a discussion as a board, because I've been on this board for now 2 years, and we really have not touched on these key pieces of what are the board values, how do we help the superintendent and staff understand where our concerns are related to the CIP and that decision-making process. So the one thing I wanted my colleagues to really think about is, in supporting this, not only will I hope that it allows us to have very timely, important discussions, but as I was discussing with Mr. Plattenberg over there just moments ago, this has really been the perfect storm, and not in a good way, for too long for the board and for FCPS staff administration. We have the CIP presented at the very last meeting in December, and then we have the superintendent's proposed budget at the very next meeting, which is that first meeting in January. So two of what I think are the most significant things that this board does, and they are right on top of each other. And so the pressure on staff to be answering budget questions and the superintendent to prepare that budget and present it to the world, and then the CIP and all of its intricacies, it's just been incredible. And that was why I was so conflicted tonight about what are we doing here. So I will just say that I really hope my colleagues will support this motion, because I hope we're demonstrating to the public how serious we take our role and responsibility in the CIP. And given the date that Ms. Reed received from Mr. Plattenberg, I think it's really important. We owe it to our community to have this work session by this deadline. And I also look forward to working with my colleagues, our superintendent and Mr. Plattenberg, to figure out a better timeline for how the CIP arrives at the board, so that maybe we're not, again, overwhelming staff and overwhelming the school board by having these two things on top of each other. And then I don't think we get a chance to do our best work. You know, come February 13th, I think that's the date, Mr. Moon, when we vote on the proposed superintendent's budget, then it's off to the board of supervisors, and, you know, we'll have some things there, but why are we so compressed in 2 weeks' time to make really serious decisions? So my final comment is to say, Mr. Plattenberg, to you as well as your staff, I really appreciate everything you guys have had to pull together for this, on top of all the budget work and then all of the incredible amount of snow. So hopefully we'll get through tonight, and you guys will get to reach the weekend. But I do look forward to us trying to work together and make this a better process.
Okay, just for the record, the vote on the budget is at next meeting, February 6th. Ms. Hines, and to be followed by Ms. McElveen.
Yeah, thank you. I want to make sure I understand what I'm voting on here. And I know that both Ms. Reed and Ms. Evans have been working for over a week and have sent us things and had phone conversations, and this is difficult. It is. There are 12 of us. You know, it's a lot of work. But yet, you know, here we are voting on two things tonight that we're seeing for the first time, you know. And so when I was listening to you at first, Mrs. Reed, I was taking notes, and I was thinking, okay, so we're talking about we're going to choose a few, you know, just a very few, just to make this manageable. We're going to choose a few things that we're going to get a work session on in April, and that will be the beginning of a conversation with the community about a couple of really key things that we haven't really talked about, right? But then that's not what I heard. What I actually am hearing now is that we expect by April 30th, to have the kitchen sink all figured out. I mean, every single issue that could come up, right, that we feel like we haven't answered yet. I mean, so my question is, how are we actually going to do this? How are we going to develop a list of issues in time for us to have them discussed and resolved by April 30th in this big complex thing we call the CIP? And and maybe I misheard, okay, but if the idea is to have answers for staff by April 30th, because April 30th is when staff has told us they need answers to these priority policy questions in order to start building the next CIP, then what I'm hearing is we have to talk about these things and resolve them and have it all done. And so I want to check and make sure that I'm right about that. So, and then I have a follow-on question.
Okay, Ms. Hines, I am not the maker of the motion, but if this motion passes, as the chair, who is responsible for scheduling meetings, including work session, will be directed to schedule a work session to, as it is stated, to discuss key policy issues. So therefore, what I will be doing is I'll try to find a time. There is only so much time we can allocate for any work session on any topic. So I'll try to find set aside a reasonable amount of time on CIP related, and we'll be working with the staff, and I'll probably get some input from all board members to see what issues we can discuss first, and we can go from there. I just, as a one board member, as the chair, just doesn't see that we'll be able to discuss all issues in one work session. So there will be, I'll take that as a directive from the board if this motion passes. But
Thank you.
I'm not the maker of the motion.
Right, I know. No, and I thank you, and I think we do have to do that. My question remains, though, who decides what those issues are? And how do we decide what those issues are? I mean,
sometimes you would have to trust the staff and the chair and vice chair in coming up with the issues, and we'll go from there. If the board members want to have other issues to be added, we can schedule further work session to see.
Well, if that's the plan, I don't know that I can support this. I think this is, we have a forum where we can informally discuss things like this.
Board members are welcome to bring anything to the forum.
That's the way I would prefer to do this, just because I don't think we have an opportunity here to really talk about this in the way that we have to. Maybe I'm missing something.
Okay. Any member is welcome to bring this to the forum if further discussion is needed to decide which issues you want to discuss. With that, let me see. I have Mr. Beckelvin to be followed by Mrs. Strauss.
My concerns were the same as Ms. Hines.
It's well noted, Mrs. Strauss.
Just a couple of historical comments. I appreciate all the policy things that everybody wants to discuss, and that's fine. We all enjoy meetings. And I do trust the chairman and the staff will somehow figure this out. There have been in the past policies set by not this particular board configuration, but others, where we actually set a limit on the ideal size for elementary, middle, and high school. We were never able to stay at that because it was too expensive. There was a time in the early 2000s where we did a bond where we had no elementary renovations, and that was unsatisfactory to the community. We had to back off on that. And it is sort of interesting, sort of the cycles of concerns, and they are different depending on the time. In the early 1980s, one of the most difficult things that this county had to face was declining enrollment. And there was a huge county-wide study that closed schools that were very, very painful. And then in 1982, there was a county-wide boundary study for all high schools. That was awful. And by about 1990, we had come pretty close to satisfying capital needs. We were pretty much caught up, and then we've never been able to get to that spot again. So there have been times when we have discussed some of these issues and have resolved policies. They looked great on paper, and then we're never able to actually hold to them. Industry standards will often say the optimal time for renovation, and renovation that gets to the real infrastructure of a building, the plumbing, the heating, the what have you, is 25 to 30 years. We've never been able to keep to that. Not that we didn't want to. So that's fine. I'm sure we will figure this one out, and I will vote for the motion. Thanks.
Mr. Narcofax.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be supporting this. When I talked to Ms. Reed this afternoon and we talked about various options that were out there, we realized that the depth and breadth of these issues that needed to be discussed and needed to be put out there were many. And I didn't see the April 30th the same way, Ms. Hines, as you were seeing it. I saw it more as a starting point and a launching point, because I think we realize there are so many issues we have really never talked about. We had an FPAC presentation, and they brought some issues to us that require some some analysis. We, have the issues brought forth, in the discussions tonight with the amendments. I think the issues are many and varied, and I do believe the forum can be used as a launching pad to help refine these issues. Ms. Reed and I also talked about, as we go forward, we're having a retreat this weekend, and when we talk about strategic initiatives that we will take, I don't know where that discussion will take us, but if we're defining priorities, and today we're talking about needing to look at this CIP, that should be one of our priorities when we go and we have this strategic planning initiative. So I will be supporting it, and I think it's a good start to a conversation that we all know we need to have, but we just, I think as a board, with the new superintendent, with the budget woes that we've been having, we've been judicious in not overutilizing the forum to overload our schedules, and I appreciate that from all the board members. But I think that now that the time is coming, and after this weekend's retreat, we'll be able to start doing that again. And I think this may be the perfect topic to have broader, larger forum discussions as we then go to bring the specifics, the key policy issues to the work session.
Any other board member who hasn't spoken yet? Ms. Evans?
I appreciate Ms. Derenak Kofax, because I see this the same way, and thank you, Mrs. Reed, for bringing this forward. I too see this as the beginning of a discussion. We continually say we have broader policy issues. It's time that we actually sat down and started that discussion and outline the issues in the policy. So I agree with Ms. Derenak Kofax. It's just the beginning of the discussion.
Any other board member who hasn't spoken yet before I do go back? We have one go back. Mrs. McLaughlin.
I actually have a question for Chairman Moon. I really appreciated what Ms. Hines was saying about this work session and the language which says key policy issues, which I'm very excited about, but I also want to make sure that outside of just tonight's discussion, that when this work session, if we do approve it to take place, would capture the consensus of the board of which key policy issues we would try to make sure we focused on. So my question, Chairman Moon, is there's two thoughts in my mind. One is you and Ms. Derenak Kofax and Ms. Goddard could draft, based on tonight's discussion, what you heard the key policy issues are, or we could just put it as a upcoming forum topic discussion where the 12 of us could then bring the key policy issues we want to make sure get covered for this work session. So in essence, tonight we take action saying, yes, this merits a work session, but then there's two different ways to make sure we get the consensus of the board of which key policy issues we're going to really focus on, because as we've talked about, this is a broad topic.
I mean, as I said earlier, any board member is welcome to bring any topic to the forum for discussion. Having said that, I also want to note that there are many more than just two different ways to, determine which issues to discuss first. And I've seen this emotionally today, just the last few hours. So you need to give me and the vice chair and staff and the superintendent a little more time to think about how to best approach this.
That sounds great. I can support that. Thank you.
Okay, with that, is there any other, Ms. Hines?
Thank you, Mrs. McLaughlin. The only way I can support this is if we have that conversation in public. It's not okay with me that we go 2 by 2 and decide what are the really big issues that we need to focus staff and board time on the CIP. Because Mrs. Schultz had a nice list, but it's not my list. And your list might not be the list of the folks in Hunter Mill, the things that they want us to talk about, and we really have to have that conversation in public. So the only way I can support this is if we bring this to a forum before.
Ms. Hines, I can assure you one thing, if not anything else, I believe in transparency, And my approach, no matter what I end up deciding to do, will be as transparent as it can be. Yes, Mrs. Reed.
Just to end the conversation, yes, I think that that would be my understanding too. So I think that it's the beginning, to quickly address your points, Ms. Hines, I do think that it would be the beginning of a process. We do have a lot of work to do, and I have faith in our leadership team and our staff to help call out the issues and at least to set some priorities. But I also agree with you that all of this needs to happen in the public venue because it's their money that we're spending. So they have every right and should be very involved in every discussion about how we set priorities and how we spend that money. So I hope I've resolved your concerns. Thank you.
Seeing no other hand, let me call for the vote on the motion that the board schedule work session by April 30, 2014 to discuss key policy issues associated with the CIP prior to the development of the FY 2016 through 2020 CIP. All those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. Strauss, Evans, Schurz, McElvin, Terana, Koufax, Moon, McLaughlin, Hines, Reed, Stork, opposing, Verkov and Smith. The motion passes. Thank you very much. That's the last motion related to CIP. We'll go to the next item of business. It's a consent agenda. Our adopted rules of parliamentary procedures, Robert's rules, provide for a consent agenda listing several items for approval of the board by a single motion. Most of the items listed under the consent agenda have gone through board committee review and recommendation. Documentation concerning these items has been provided to all board members and public in advance to assure an extensive and thorough review. Items may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of any board member prior to the meeting. 5.01, approve the minutes of the December 9, 2013 operational expectation work session and the January 9, 2014 regular school board meeting. 5.02, confirm the separations for the period beginning December 1, 2013 and ending December 31, 2013 as detailed in the agenda item. 5.03, confirm the appointments and separations for the period beginning October 1, 2013 and ending December 31, 2013 as detailed in the agenda item. 5.04, appoint Rosemary Annunziata, Louis Berlin, William Chapman, Edward Clymer, and John Robinson to serve as hearing officers for teacher dismissal hearings pursuant to Section 22.1311 of the Code of Virginia, effective immediately. 5.05, authorize the division superintendent and the assistant superintendent and Department of Facilities and Transportation Services, either of whom may act without the other, to do all things necessary and appropriate on behalf of the school board and with the advice of a legal counsel for the school division to execute and to deliver a deed of vacation and release of a development restriction of record applicable to certain real property known as Fairfax County Tax Map Number 101-2-01-0010C. 5.06, award the contract for the telescopic indoor bleacher replacement at Robinson Secondary School to the lowest responsible bidder, TJ Distributors of Maryland, Inc., in the amount of $622,400, and authorize the division superintendent or the assistant superintendent of facilities and transportation services to execute and administer the contract on behalf of the school board. 5.07, appoint individuals to serve on committees as detailed in the agenda item. Is there any objection to approving the consent agenda? Hearing and seeing no objection, the consent agenda is approved. The next order of business is new business. The following are new business agenda items. There will not be a vote tonight on these items, but action is scheduled at a future meeting. 6.01, confirm the membership and executive board of the Title I District Advisory Council as detailed in the agenda item. 6.02, confirm the elected members of Fairfax County Public Schools Early Head Start, Family and Early Childhood Education Program, Head Start Policy Committee as detailed in the agenda item. 6.03, authorize the division superintendent or her designee to sign all documents associated with the sale of the house on Lot 5, 7007, Springfield Court, Springfield, Virginia 22150 of a Spring Village Estates. 6.04, award contract for Irving Middle School and Braddock Elementary School re-roofing projects to the lowest responsible bidder, and authorize the division superintendent or the assistant superintendent of facilities and transportation services to execute and administer the contracts on behalf of the school board. 6.05, award the contract for the window, lintel, and sill replacement at Twain Middle School to the lowest responsible bidder, and authorize the division superintendent or the assistant superintendent of facilities and transportation services to execute and administer the contract on behalf of the school board. The next order of business is superintendent matters, and Mr. Paris.
Thank you, Chairman Moon. First of all, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to allow me to make my boss look good. I think after sitting in for her, I'm sure you're all going to be rooting for her to get better real soon and get back in this chair. But I did want to offer some perspective tonight on probably the larger question that's been in the last few days, which is around snow days and how those decisions get made. As someone that's been in the organization now for over 30 years, depending on the time period, my perceptions around the snow day decision always ranged somewhere from anxiety to excitement. When I first arrived as a substitute, I was universally rooting for school to be in session every day because I needed to draw a paycheck at the end of the week. As a teacher, I would watch TV with my kids. This was before our online tools got as good. My kids would almost always root for there to be a snow day, and they would ask me every 5 minutes, did I actually know what was going to happen? And I would tell them remind them that I was actually watching TV with them. I didn't have any new information based on the last time they'd asked me a few minutes before. And as a principal, I always had mixed feelings about our decision. I worried about our drivers. I think driving a bus is a challenging endeavor, and when you have challenging weather conditions, it makes it tougher. I worried about our parents, that many of them drove their kids to school and how hard that was. I worried about our teachers. I know their urgency around helping all kids achieve and that every instructional minute is precious. I was thoughtful about how I would respond to parents, because every time if we decided to keep kids at home, then I would have parents that would call me to say that we were way too cautious, that we didn't value instructional time to the degree that we should. If we had kids come in, I would have parents, and both sets of these parents were right, and they would ask me, you know, how are we prioritizing safety? So in looking at that, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the what questions, because we've already put that out and you've announced it as well, that we are going to be in school tomorrow, and I'm glad about that. It is going to be on a 2-hour delayed opening. We are going to make some adjustments around the exam schedule and how that works, and we've sent that out to families and our faculties as well. But I did want to talk a little bit about the how questions and the why questions. So in the how questions, as a teacher, I always assumed that there was somebody in Fairfax that set their alarm for 3 o'clock in the morning, got up, looked out the window, and decided whether we go to school or not. When I got to central office, I was very much relieved to learn that it's a far more involved process than that, and it's a very collaborative process. We engage with the police department, a number of agencies, the Weather Service, to get as much information as we can. And then on top of that, we send out our own people, our security people. We send out our route supervisors to actually drive the routes and look where kids are going to be walking, where these buses will have to travel, and all that information comes back. And basically we ask ourselves, are there dangerous or treacherous situations that are in place in the county? And if the answer is yes, then we err on the side of safety for students. Okay? So applied that to the situation that we have right now and looking at the why question. So I would make 4 basic assumptions to where we are right now. A, we're always going to err on the side of safety for kids. kids coming back, because they're going to come back, I'm sure they're worried about it right now. I don't believe that it would be a fair condition to have somebody come back after not having contact with their teacher over a few days to walk into an exam. So we're not going to allow, I don't think anyone in the organization wants that to happen, and we'll adjust for it. Now, there are some kids that are on online environments and things that are probably in a better position, but for those that have face-to-face, the next couple of days, we're not going to start the exam cycle because most high schools are on an every other day schedule. My wife's a fourth grade teacher, and I know that when she assigns a grade, it's something that she spends a lot of time with, and she wants to have a lot of confidence that the grades she assigns actually reflect what kids know and are able to do. So teachers are going to need some flexibility with the time to make sure that they can do this to the degree that they feel comfortable with it, and I can assure you that we are going to provide that flexibility. The other basic assumption is somebody asked the question earlier, we have over 200 locations in Fairfax, and after being around for a long time, I know that there's not likely to be a single decision that's going to be right for everyone. So schools are going to need a little, some flexibility about how they adjust their schedules to meet this within parameters, and we're going to provide that as well. There are some considerations around this, the semester turn that are always there, particularly for seniors with the 7th semester reporting. There are things that need to go out to colleges. There are some deadlines that we have to meet, and we're going to meet them and honor those. You know, if we don't have some other unforeseen weather event that happens between now and then, which I don't see. So we will meet those, but we will give schools and teachers flexibility up until that time and adjust to make sure that that happens. But I can assure you, this is a difficult decision. It's made collectively by a lot of folks. It's, you know, and we see this as one of the most important things that we do. Thank you.
Okay, I think Mrs. McLaughlin just want to ask one question to Mr. Paris.
Mr. Paris, I really appreciate you speaking to this during Superintendent Matters, because many of us, and practically all of us, have received numerous emails from concerned parents, and we were really trying to do our best, especially in the last 24 hours, to try and respond to those concerns. And so earlier today, you were very gracious to talk with me about ways that we can continuously improve as a school system in how we notify our families. And so I just wanted to say that I hope moving forward, perhaps if we, as a board, have a dialogue, I mean, maybe this is what I need to do, is bring it forward as a forum topic, but I think you touched upon the key points, but it is in the end about the information we provide our families as soon as possible, and as we've seen through the emails, parents understanding that, you know, the rationale for how we make the decisions, I think will go a long way for people understanding how careful and how thoughtful we are in making that decision. And I also think that parents have also, through their emails, raised some very interesting ideas about a school system with 200 plus, you know, facilities, and how do we do this? You know, maybe new ways of improving how we make decisions of having the entire system closed. And Ms. Reed also had brought up the issue about utilizing our technology in this 21st century when we have things like multiple school day closures. So just wanted to kind of tag that along and kind of place that thinking in front of you, because I know how much you're committed to us always doing our very best. And, you know, again, it goes to Mr. Plattenberg, who I think has the most difficult job in this time of season, and definitely early waking hours that the public just simply doesn't appreciate. So again, my thanks to Mr. Plattenberg and his amazing staff, who truly are dedicated to going out there making sure we have safe conditions for our children to be educated.
So as much as I would like to blame it on Mr. Plattenberg sometimes that it's solely his decision, it is a collective decision of our group to do it, and I know he's got a difficult task. As an organization, we're always committed to continuous improvement, and we'll try to do better. I think we've done better about getting information out earlier about school closings, And I think you always balance that with, do people want a complete picture? And what we've tried to do tonight is answer all those questions right in a row. But I'm always open to better ideas about how we can improve that communication.
To those students who may be watching us, I want you to know that school opening decision has been made. We're not going to reverse it. I know that you've been sending me several dozens I have already received, asking me to sort of basically reverse that decision. That's not going to be done. Just go to sleep and get up early and go to school. Next, we have a report. I have Mr. Stork from January 13th.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The audit committee met on January 13th. We discussed a number of issues, including our audit plan, which is a comprehensive plan of all of our auditing throughout the county facility, all of the county's school system, as well as parts of it that are done by other portions of the county, including staff. We considered office staffing related to the position that we had, the board approved recently, the audit manager position. We looked at some audit results that's reported to us on bank reconciliations, which are posted to our site, and anyone's welcome to look at those. And we have also discussions about the school activity funds audit, discuss the audit customer satisfaction survey. These are responses from our employees on how the audit committee members worked with them and frankly how effective and supportive they were in the process, but also make sure that they were professional in the responses to them. And finally, we discussed the risk assessment, which is something that we have out as a request for proposal right now, and we're looking for firms to get information to us. I believe it closes at the end of January, the period for getting those proposals in, and then the board will be looking at the process that we want to follow for determining how to award that contract for the risk assessments. Thank you.
We have Ms. Hines for the public engagement.
Ms. Evans is going to give the report.
Yes, I'm going to give the report if you don't mind. We discussed the Education Summit, and we discussed dates and locations. We're going to bring a recommendation to you. We are looking at September 27th. We agreed that Edison was an excellent location for the Education Summit for 2013. We threw out the ideas of going to Marshall or Falls Church High School. We wanted to go to some different locations in different parts of the county for our Education Summit. We talked a little bit about client communications, and we also discussed how we might get more visibility for Dr. Garza's budget presentation.
Okay, we had an all-day work session on January 13th. Who are the meeting managers who want to report out? Blueprint for change and facilities. Mr. Welcome, you want to do it?
I'll be happy to do the facilities portion of the work session, and since we discussed, and the purpose of the facilities discussion was the CIP, and we've spent a fair amount of time this evening discussing that, I would say this probably summarizes in many ways the discussion we had at the work session as well. Thank you.
And I chaired a session on the Blueprint for Change and then the budget. So first on the Blueprint for Change, we had a presentation from the Children's National Medical Center. They gave us a summary of the work that they've done to date. Initially, they developed, I believe, 9 options and have narrowed that down to somewhere between 2 and 4. In January, they're going to be presenting us with a survey, the survey questions that they've sent out to the principals. In April, we're expecting to see some recommendations from them. And I think one action was that we asked the consultants to provide more frequent updates and communications. The last work session was on the budget, and I'm going to review what happened in the budget, and then I'm going to going to add a few personal comments about the budget. So if you haven't tuned out right now, I'm going to humbly attempt to make some substantive comments at the end here. So at the budget meeting, we saw that DCCO has developed a two-page budget fact sheet in English and in Spanish, and it's available for us to use when we're engaging with the community. I want to remind, and as I did then, I'll remind us again, we're going to have the hearing next Monday on the 27th. And we will have our work session on the budget on January 30th, so that's a week from tonight. And I would encourage anyone who has amendments to get them out beforehand so that we have a chance to look at them and can have a substantive discussion of any proposed amendments during that work session a week from today. And finally, that they really need to be done after we've had that discussion. Please have them turned in to the clerk of the board and the chairman, and copy me on Friday the 31st. So if I may just take a moment here, as budget chair, I would like to say a few words. Since I've been watching the conversation about the budget over the past 2 weeks as it's evolved in the community, I sort of feel like I'm watching a monitor where the red and the blue are connected and the green's missing, and I'm not seeing true colors. So I'm going to attempt to add a little green here tonight. One of the themes that I saw had to do with, shall I say, that 4 years ago when we went through a similarly difficult period, that we sort of papered over the problem. And I think it's worth remembering some of the things that this board did. First of all, we made significant cuts. There were a lot of positions and a lot of savings that were found by significant cuts back in, I think it was about 2010. My predecessors and my colleagues who are more senior can remember all of this. And I would point out that when the new superintendent came in, she looked for the kinds of low-hanging fruit that she found in her previous district and found it not to be here, which is to say that a lot of cuts had been made. Another point I want to make about what happened 4 years ago was something that happened down in Richmond between January and the adoption of that budget. The General Assembly gave a holiday on paying into the retirement system for employees in the state. So the effect was that it erased some paper difficulties that the state was having, but it meant that the delay in paying into employees' retirement system was pushed into the future. And if you look at our budget right now, one of the things that we're coping with is the fact that we're repaying at an increased rate the payments that were delayed by the General Assembly. So I just want everybody to understand that it's not, I want to make sure that we're seeing in full color that the school board and the superintendent 4 years ago were not just papering over a difficulty in masking a problem. What the General Assembly, just to make it really clear, what the General Assembly did would be, the equivalent for us would be as if we decided to take the ERFC, the payment that we pay into the ERFC, and we said, you know what, let's just take a holiday for a year or 2 years. Now, we wouldn't do that, but you could find money that way. So, thank goodness we don't. The last thing I want to say, and I appreciate you all bearing with me here, there was also discussion, I've seen some discussion about the rhetoric used by the superintendent at our work session. And I just want to say that what I saw was a demonstration of courage and resolve and conviction. When we were seeking a superintendent, we discussed what we were looking for in that person. And we noted that it was paradoxical that we wanted someone who was a strong leader who followed the board. How do you resolve those things? Well, you know, a strong leader could have said, hey, step increase is $41 million. There's no way I'm putting that in there. Taking that off the table right away. Or a follower could have said, wow, I put that $41 million in there, but the board made me do it. No, what we got was we have somebody who said, that was the board's priority, and I believe in it, and we're going to do it. So I just want us all to remember here. A year ago, we made a commitment to our employees that a step increase was the highest priority. And we were committing ourselves to jumping off the diving board, whether there was water in that pool or not. And I just want you to know that the first person off the diving board was our superintendent. And I urge all of you to please join me in following her on February 6th and jumping off that board. Thank you for indulging me.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have a board matters. Again, considering the fact that we have a work session, only those board members who absolutely have to use some board matter time are, again, welcome to do it. I will start with Mrs. Strauss.
Thank you. I'll pass, but I'll jump.
Ms. Evans.
Yes, I want to say how much I enjoyed meeting with the student leaders from Stewart High School, Annandale High School, and Falls Church High School, and how much I appreciate Will Ash joining us for most of the time. So that was always very insightful to talk with students. I enjoyed attending the NAACP holiday celebration on Martin Luther King weekend with some of my colleagues on the board. And lastly, I want to thank Mr. Velkoff for his comments. I think that that what you said is right on about where we are, and I know we'll have more discussion, so I won't go into it here, but I particularly appreciate you going back to the 2010, as I have mentioned in the past. That's the gift that keeps on giving.
Mrs. Church.
First of all, I think we got to keep our first things first and wish that Dr. Garza gets better. She's home and very, very sick, so please feel better. We missed you tonight. Second is I have two community committee appointments open, and I'm actually, although it feels like interviewing, I'm enjoying meeting a wonderful group of constituents who've come forward who've asked to help us do our work and help volunteer. One is on, and tonight's a good night to talk about it, the CTE, the CTE committee. The other is ACSD. So if any community members in the Springfield district do have an interest in serving in some capacity, please don't hesitate to contact us. I think I neglected last time, we did talk about Melissa Porfirio as one of the 4 national finalists in the National Teacher of the Year contest. I did go and look. It's Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Florida. So we must have a concentration of good teachers in this part of the country, but we hope that Ms. Porfirio gets selected. I'd like to debunk something. I think that quite often the board leaves debunking to staff, and rumors get started out there, and all of my kids on Twitter universe. We don't have more snow days because Dr. Garza is from Texas. And that's not just from kids, that's from parents too. There is a gross misconception about what weather is like in Texas. And as Dr. Garza has shared with us on many occasions, she probably had more severe weather cancellations in Lubbock than we experience in FCPS. So while it is a coincidence, I don't remember having, other than Snowmageddon, a series of snow days. Dr. Garza is not light on snow because she's from Texas, so we'll debunk that myth. Speaking of the snow days, I want to thank Mr. Paris for addressing so adroitly some of those issues. I do try to respond to all constituents who email me. I do my best. I was keeping up with it very well last night and through the night, not so well today, but I will try to get to you. But I have already advanced the conversation with staff and begun the process of putting together a forum topic. I do think that the experience this week, if we listen to our constituents and the parents and the teachers who are concerned, who are emailing us as we speak, either happy or unhappy about school tomorrow, I haven't figured out which is the leading perspective, that it's time for us to have a discussion. You know, we are in, it's 407, 408 square miles, which is a vast, vast geography. And you could literally be in one neighborhood and it's fine, and in the next neighborhood it's not. You know, do you have state roads? Does your homeowners association plow? Do you plow yourself? You know, are there sidewalks in your neighborhood? Are there not sidewalks in your neighborhood? And so I have put together a forum topic so that the board can more thoughtfully approach this. It won't be something that would be addressed for the balance of this calendar year. But again, thinking strategically, I do think we need to have a discussion. And some of the comments have been taken to heart, and we'll do what we can to look at this issue in combination with staff. In addition, I think that some of us have asked that any decisions that do come out, that if possible, it's advantageous for us as a board and for the school division to educate and inform up front as opposed to explain later. And I think we always get behind the 8 ball if we're explaining, and being forthright and sharing more information up front, I think will help relieve some parental angst. Coming up, I think we have a couple of very busy weeks. We have budget public hearings. You've heard us talk a lot about this, and now's the chance for you to talk to us about it. Those are coming up. I don't have the calendar in front of me. In a week plus on Monday and Tuesday. Please be encouraged to sign up. Ms. McLaughlin and I are going to be at Lake Braddock next week. I'm very excited on Wednesday to have our final scheduled student town hall. So we look forward to seeing you there, and I will be at the Chinese New Year here on the 1st, and look forward to going to Fairfax High School next week as well to meet with Principal Goldfarb.
Okay, again, I want to remind board members that we have a work session, and if you could limit your remarks to the absolute minimum. Thank you, Mr. McRibbon.
I yield my time to Michael Malloy.
Well, thank you very much, Mrs. Smith.
I want to congratulate the counselors at Brookfield Elementary School because they have received the RAMP certification. So that is really good. And I will be having a Sully District budget meeting on February 5 at 7 p.m. at Rocky Run Middle School.
Mr. Narcovics.
Thank you. My listening tour with Dr. Garza was a victim of our Snowmageddon here, our mini Snowmageddon. So we have rescheduled that, and it will be on February 17th from 6:30 to 8, same time, same place, Mark Twain Middle School, again though February 17th. This is President's Day, but there will be school that day, so we hope the attendance will still be good. I will also be having a meet and greet prior to that, actually, at the John Marshall Library, and that will be on February 6th, and that's from 7 to 8:30 p.m. in the community room. And I'm hoping over the next few weeks to get a lot of good cultural arts performances, as I'm hoping to go and see your Good Man Charlie Brown this weekend at Hayfield. Cats is also at Fairfax High School, and there will be a district chorus performance the first weekend of February, so I look forward to attending as many of those as I can. Thank you.
Mrs. McLaughlin.
I briefly wanted to share with my colleagues that this morning I met with my Braddock supervisor, John Cook. for about an hour, and we had a really interesting conversation, and I want to emphasize the word conversation about the budget and the budget process. And I wanted my colleagues to really think about the value of sitting down, if you haven't already done this, with your district supervisor, because just having the discussion about things like structural imbalance and the increase in transfer, to have that ability to really talk one-on-one about it and get his varying thoughts and perspective and mine. When we have our joint board meetings, we never have time to actually have those more extensive, personalized discussions. And he, is, like myself, has children in our public schools. So he has a very personal vested interest along with one as a public official. But I thought that he and I both learned a great deal from today's meeting, and we'll continue to have that dialogue. But I would, again, encourage my colleagues that from what I saw today, I think it will go a long way for all of us in continuing to develop that relationship between the two boards and hopefully help us as we move through this challenging budget cycle. So that was 1 minute and 40 seconds.
Okay, thank you. I think all of our board members do actually talk with their supervisors on a regular basis. Ms. Hines.
Yeah, I agree. Very important discussions. Quickly, I want to thank Mr. McElvain and the teachers and administrators at Louise Archer Elementary for a great meeting last Thursday. We got to sit and have an informal conversation and get a lot of good feedback from teachers. Also, thank you to the Forest Edge PTA for inviting me to your meeting last week. I'm looking forward to the Madison High School leadership class tomorrow after the 2-hour delay. They'll have about a half-hour class, I think, and I'm really looking forward to having some time to catch up with the students and see what they have to say. Also, thanks to Howard Pearlstein, our Hunter Mill member on FPAC, Facilities Planning Advisory Committee. He and I will be chatting on Sunday, and hopefully he can explain to me some of the things I voted on tonight.
Besides, Mrs. Reed.
Thank you. I'll be brief. Wanted to congratulate Providence Elementary School. They've been named a winner of one of 11 Programs That Work Awards for 2014 by the Virginia Mathematics and Science Coalition, and that deals with 21st century skills. I wanted to say farewell and best wishes to Principal of Luther Jackson, Louise Porter. She retires on February 1st. Louise, we'll miss you, and we thank you for your 32 years of service to FCPS. And last but not least, on Monday, I'll be speaking at Falls Church High School at a Teachers for Tomorrow class, and I'll be using some of Mr. McElvain's presentation materials to talk about what the school board does.
Mr. Stork.
Pass.
Okay, with that, this meeting is adjourned and